Chapter 1085. Ursu held a small bowl and nodded. Her eyes lit up and she said, "So that's how it is. Brother is so amazing." "Of course, I am your brother." Li Zhenqian was not modest at all. He raised his face and said naturally. Li Zhenqian and Li Zhenyue had 2 children who were only 4 years old this year. Yu Lily looked at the 2 of them. Her eyes were filled with envy and emotion. These children were so smart. It was not like the flexibility and intelligence of their age. It was hard to imagine that such a smart child was a child who had lost 4 years of fatherly love. "Brother Mosen is also very good." Li Zhenyue held the small bowl and said, "Mom, I want more." "You can't eat any more. You can't eat so much at night." Li Xiqing took her small bowl down and put it on the table. Then he took a tissue and wiped the corner of her mouth. He looked at the residue on her nightgown and said, "Look at your clothes. What is this?" When Li Zhenyue heard that, she blinked her eyes and looked down at her clothes. She exclaimed, "What's going on?" "You have to ask yourself. What did you do?" Li Xiqing said as he wiped her. "You have no right to make conditions now." "No." Li Zhenyue was anxious and shouted, "Dad, you must be cheating. Dad framed me, right?" Li Xiqing raised his hand and pinched her little face. He said, "Little bad girl, who did you learn from? You actually want to frame your father?" Li Zhenyue pouted and said unhappily, "I don't care. Dad is bad. I just want to sleep with Mom." "No." Li Xiqing said faintly, "You have grown up and have to sleep by yourself. You see that your brothers are very strong. Why do you like to cheat so much?" "I don't." Li Zhenyue was even more aggrieved. She sat on the sofa and pouted. She looked at Xueqi and said, "Mom." "It's useless to call Mom. I have the final say on this matter." Li Xiqing covered her eyes mercilessly and said, "Mosen, take your sister back to sleep." Li Mosen quietly breathed a sigh of relief and walked over happily. He said, "Let's go, Ursu. I will take you back to sleep." "I don't want to. I don't want to." Li Zhenyue looked like she was about to cry. "I just want to sleep with Mommy. Daddy. Sleep with brother. Why do you want to sleep with Mummy?" Xueqi walked over, held her daughter in her arms, and said, "Ursu, you have to listen to Daddy, so that Daddy will love you more in the future." "No, I don't want to sleep with my brothers anymore. Granny Rong said that girls can't sleep with boys." Li Zhenyue pouted. "Men and women can't be separated clearly. If it was in ancient times, I would be put into a pig's cage and drowned with a big rock." Ming couldn't help laughing and said, "That's called drowning in a pig cage." "Yes, drowning him in a pig cage." Li Zhenyue held Xueqi's hand and said pitifully, "I don't want to drown. Mom, I want to sleep with you." Seeing this, not only Ming, but Yu Lily and Xueqi also laughed together. Li Xiqing felt a little helpless. He reached out and grabbed her saying, "They are your brothers. You are still young and can't sleep alone. Your brothers will take care of you." Chapter 1086. Li Zhenyue almost cried as she spoke. She waved her hands and shouted at Xueqi, "Mom, look, Dad is bullying me." Li Xiqing held his daughter's collar and smiled helplessly. He said, "Little one, you still know to ask for help. Be quiet." Li Zhenyue immediately shut up and became quiet. She turned her head and looked at Xueqi pitifully. She said, "Mom, you don't help me." Xueqi laughed out loud. She reached out her hands and held the little one in her arms. She said, "Okay, sleep with Mom tonight. Let Dad sleep with your brothers." "No." "One big and one small," they said in unison. Li Xiqing and Li Mosen looked at each other. Li Xiqing raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Li Mosen. The little one met Li Xiqing's gaze, and her overly white face began to blush. She bowed her head slightly and said, "Ursu, Dad and Mom are husband and wife. They should sleep together. You can't sleep with them. That way you will become a third party." Ming was even choked by his saliva. Why did this family not play by the rules? Is this a third party? Who taught you that? Yu Lily shook her head with a smile and said, "Third parties are not like this. Only those who destroy the relationship between husband and wife are called third parties. Do you know that?" "Yes, this is a third party." Li Xiqing nodded and looked at Li Mosen with a touch of appreciation in his eyes. He said, "Ursu, you are destroying the relationship between mom and dad. Do you know that?" Li Jianyue blinked, looked at Li Xiqing, and then looked at Xueqi. She was a little confused and asked, "Mom, really?" Xueqi was speechless for a while and didn't know what to say. Really? Of course not. But since Li Xiqing said so, she couldn't tell the truth at this time. How could he face the children like this? For a moment, she was in a dilemma. Ming coughed softly and said, "Ursu, Uncle can prove that you are not a third party. But if you do this, you are no different from a third party. Don't do this kind of thing, understand?" When Li Jianyue heard that, she pursed her lips. Her big eyes were moist. She looked at Ming and said in disbelief, "Really?" Ming nodded with a serious look on his face. "It's true, so you have to listen to me." As he spoke, he glanced at the time and said, "It's almost 9 o'clock. Aren't you going to bed yet? Mosen, Desu, take your sister to bed." Xueqi immediately followed his words and said, "Yes, go and take your sister to bed." Li Mosen was the first to run up and said, "Ursu, let's go." Li Jianyue's tears were in her eyes, and they were about to fall. However, she still climbed down from Xueqi's body and followed Li Mosen. However, as her little feet stepped on the ground, her body trembled. She looked back at Xueqi 3 times with every step and sniffed before following Li Mosen up the stairs. Li Jianqian said, "Dad, Mom, I'm going too." "Go ahead." He nodded, waved his hand and whispered, "Remember to make your sister happy." Okay. Li Jianqian nodded and ran up the stairs. "Be careful." Xueqi shouted behind him. "Walk slowly. Don't run." Chapter 1087. After the children went up, Li Xiqing picked up the dessert bowl that Xueqi had just put down in front of him and scooped a mouthful. Ming stared at it and said with some surprise, "I thought you don't eat sweets?" Li Xiqing heard the words, glanced at Ming indifferently and said, "What do you know? My wife's cooking is very delicious." Xueqi's cheeks were slightly red, and her ears were hot. She said, "No, he was talking nonsense." However, seeing Li Xiqing's serious look, Ming was also skeptical, so he also picked up his bowl and took a bite. Li Xiqing's eyes were fixed on Ming, as if Ming said one bad word, he could beat him at any time. Ming nodded seriously, looked at Xueqi and said, "It's really good, very delicious, sister-in-law's cooking is good." Xueqi blushed even more and reached out to pat Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing looked back, took another bite and said, "Honey." "Yes." Xueqi looked up at Li Xiqing and raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Do you think that boy Mosen likes our daughter? What kind of like do you mean?" Xueqi looked at Li Xiqing, her eyes wide. "How is it possible? They said they are brother and sister. He himself knows that we are not related by blood, and he has been trembling with us, but he doesn't say it, and he is very careful in his behavior. Did you notice?" Li Xiqing said indifferently, and there was a hint of thought in his deep and cold eyes. "Impossible, he treats her as a sister, and such a small child, how can he know so many things?" Xueqi denied. "Don't think too much, children are still young." Yu Lily also thought that Li Xiqing was thinking too much, and said, "That child is Tang Menjing's child, right? He is only 5 years old this year, and he can't have that kind of feeling. He is good to her. Isn't it normal for siblings?" When Ming heard this, he slightly raised his eyebrows, and suddenly thought of the word "no" that Li Mosen and Li Xiqing had said at the same time. At that time, he felt that this little guy, who looked young, was very sensible. However, after Li Xiqing's reminder, there was still a bit of that feeling. However, could such a young child really have such thoughts? After thinking about it, Ming said, "I think it's possible. Your daughter is pretty and cute. Which boy wouldn't like her?" When Li Xiqing heard this, he felt as if he had finally found a soulmate. He said, "Right? You think so too? We really can't let them live together anymore. Ursu is right. It's not good for men and women to not touch each other. Ursu kicks off her blanket when she sleeps at night. She can't sleep alone." Xueqi looked at Li Xiqing and said, "At night, Mosen will cover Ursu with the quilt. Desu will occasionally wake up to drink water and cover her with the quilt. If it were up to you, our daughter would have frozen to death." As if he didn't hear the rebuke in her words, he said, "Then buy a sleeping bag, tie her up, and let her out the next day. Isn't that better?" She glared at him and kicked him rudely. "Are you raising a child or an animal? That is your daughter." Chapter 1088. Hearing that, Xueqi felt even more annoyed. She reached out and punched him, shouting, "That's too much." Li Xiqing reached out and caught her fist firmly, the corner of his mouth gently curling up. Xueqi's punch missed, and then she raised her other hand, wanting to hit him in the face. Li Xiqing smiled and raised his hand. Unexpectedly, Xueqi changed her route halfway, hooked her fist, and hit down. The wind of the punch was like a whip. It brought a cool breeze to his face, which was shocking, but it made the smile on Li Xiqing's face deeper. Seeing that Xueqi was about to hit his chin, Li Xiqing turned his hand back and grabbed her wrist. The fist was less than a centimeter away from her chin. Li Xiqing pulled her hand, then held her in his arms, and whispered, "Okay, stop fooling around. There are guests here." Xueqi's face turned red, and she struggled. "Let go. If I let go, you'll hit me." "I won't let go," Li Xiqing said with a serious face. "What I said just now is serious. Look at our daughter, she is so young, and she knows to set up a barrier between men and women. It can be seen that this child has begun to grow up, and Mosen seems to have some wild ambitions. I don't want to give my daughter to my son." Hearing that, Xueqi felt that what Li Xiqing said was a little reasonable. Li Mosen was their son, and Li Genue was their biological daughter. The palm of their hand was flesh, and the back of their hand was also flesh. Although they were not related by blood, in the eyes of the husband and wife, both children were the same. Not to mention whether they had this possibility. Just the possibility that Li Mosen had this idea was enough to make her unable to accept it. This was a bit like watching your own child. This, Xueqi suddenly shivered and said, "Why don't we let Mosen sleep alone, and Daesu and Ursu share a room?" "Idiot, what do you want Mosen to think?" Li Xiqing poked her nose and said, "Aren't you obviously letting Mosen think too much? It's not like you don't know how sensitive this child is." Xueqi also felt that something was wrong when she was reminded. This time he was frowning. After thinking about it, he said, "Then let Ursu sleep with us. Anyway, our bed is so big, and our daughter is so small. She can sleep in it." "No." Li Xiqing refused and said, "The bed is big, but my place is small." He pointed at his heart and looked at her seriously. "If my daughter comes to disturb us in the middle of the night, I will feel uncomfortable." Ugh, Xueqi's face burned even hotter, and she subconsciously glanced at Ming and Yu Lily, who were not far away. Facing their obvious ambiguous and envious gazes, she was so embarrassed that she couldn't speak. Xueqi blushed from her cheeks to the tips of her ears. She lowered her head and whispered, "Let me go. Lily and the others are still here." Li Xiqing looked indifferent. He glanced at them and said indifferently, "What are you afraid of? They are not outsiders. Besides, haven't they seen PDA before?" "Oh my God." Ming couldn't help but laugh. "Second brother, why are you getting more and more shameless? Aren't you afraid of being seen by the children and traumatizing them?" "People like you who have never had children may not understand," Li Xiqing said. "I am shaping the correct concept for my children, telling them that mom and dad are a couple." Chapter 1089. For people like them, this was called playing hooligans. Of course, Li Xiqing would not say this out loud. He gave Ming a look to let him figure it out on his own. Then he continued to hold his wife and said, "Just one sleeping bag for Ursu. Daesu and Mosen don't need sleeping bags. They sleep like me." Hearing that, Xueqi, who had calmed down with great difficulty, suddenly exploded again. She turned her head and growled, "What do you mean?" "Like you. Very obedient." "Liar." "No." "Yes." "Well, since you are so determined, I can't help it." Xueqi heard this and laughed. She hit him and said, "Shut up." "Tut." Ming couldn't stand it anymore. He glanced at Yu Lily and said, "I used to think that he was a very serious person. I didn't expect this guy to be so coquettish on the inside. I blame myself for being too young." Yu Lily heard this and couldn't help laughing. However, Her smile was full of envy. If there is nothing else, go back. We are going to sleep. Li Xiqing mercilessly asked her to leave. Even the reason was so simple and rude. Xueqi quickly covered his mouth and shouted with a red face. Li Xiqing, what are you talking about? Li Xiqing looked down at her with a little smile in his eyes. Ming felt like he was going blind. He covered his eyes and said, I came to see you, not to see you show off your love and then leave. What's the matter? Li Xiqing raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Ming. Ming nodded and said, Do you know that a chemical called Homaya has recently come out? It was a completely unfamiliar term. Xueqi and Yu Lily were both confused. They didn't even know what Homaya was. However, when Li Xiqing heard it, he nodded slightly and said, I have heard a little about it. Ming's eyes lit up. Really? Where did you hear it? At my brother's place. Third brother? Yes, he has a good friend who used to be a military doctor at the front line. Later, he retired with my brother and is doing some research on his own. My third brother's company has just started and doesn't have extra cash flow, so he asked me to invest in him. I think that's the name of the project. Oh my God! Ming almost jumped up. Looking at Li Xiqing, he was sure that he was not joking. He exclaimed, I'm looking for this now. Second brother, have you invested in that project? A little. I urgently need this medicine to concoct. Can you help me get it? Ming was very excited. He briefly explained his mother's condition. Finally, he looked at Li Xiqing and said seriously, I have to solve this matter first before I can completely get rid of the Shen family. Otherwise, I will be completely controlled by Shen Luo N. So, he doesn't have time to deal with me. But, I'm afraid that he'll come to look for trouble with our O clan once he recovers. So, got it. Li Xiqing sat up straight and reached out to take the phone from the table. After Li Xiqing hung up the phone, he looked at Ming and asked, Can I deliver it tomorrow? Yes. That's great. Ming was extremely excited. He had been worried about this medicine for a long time. He came to Li Xiqing just to give it a try, but he didn't expect. It was rare for him to come to see him, and there was such a big change. Chapter 1090. It was New Year's Eve. The children got up early and arrived at the old house. After greeting the elders, they gathered in the study and watched Li Xiao write the couplets. Old Master Li's hair was almost completely white. His withered hand held a walking stick as he sat by the side and watched his son. Originally, Old Master Li was the one who wrote the couplets. Now that he couldn't hold the pen, he could only leave it to his son. The old man looked at him and reminded him, You need to use more strength. The old voice rang out, and Li Xiao's hand immediately tightened a little. Old Master Li nodded with satisfaction and said, That's right. As he spoke, he looked at the three children and said, Watch how your grandfather writes. You three little guys, you have to practice calligraphy in the future. This is the quintessence of the nation. You can't lose it. Li Zhenqian and Li Mosen nodded, and Li Zhenhua with a pair of big round eyes, asked, Great-grandpa, what is a quintessence of the nation? It is the unique things that have been passed down from ancient times to the present. For example, calligraphy, paper cutting, guqin, chess, books, and paintings. These are all quintessence of the nation. In the future, no matter what you do or what you do, don't lose these things. Old Master Li's voice was gentle, with an old but extremely deep calmness. Ursu, come here. Li Zhenhua leaned over and called out sweetly, Great-grandpa. The smile on Old Master Li's face condensed. The wrinkles looked a little deep, but it was full of joy. After pulling the little girl over, he said, I'm not worried about your brothers. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren are all excellent children. But, the only thing I'm worried about now is you. In the future, you must find a good man. At least, he can't be worse than your brother. Do you understand? Li Zhenhua didn't seem to understand, but soon said with a smile, In the future, I want to marry Brother Mosen. A child's words carried no harm. When such a clear voice came out, Li Xiao's hand trembled slightly. With such a shake, the brush on the originally clean and tidy red paper slightly deviated. Li Mosen's face suddenly turned red, and he turned his head to look at Li Zhenhua. However, Old Master Li disagreed and said, What are you talking about? He is your brother. You can't get married. Is that so? Li Jianyue opened her eyes and blinked. But Brother Mosen said so. When Ersu grew up, she would marry Brother Mosen. However, before Li Jianyue could finish her sentence, she heard Li Mosen shout, Ersu, shu. Li Jianyue immediately swallowed her words back into her stomach. She raised her fluffy little head and looked at Li Sun with her big eyes. She smiled and said, I know, great-grandfather. Old Master Li looked at Li Jianyue and Li Mosen. He vaguely understood something. He didn't ask or say anything else. He would just let nature take its course. After Li Xiao finished writing, he put down the brush and shouted, Jian Qian, go and ask your uncle to come in. Li Jianqian turned and ran out, shouting, Dad, Uncle, Grandpa's calling for you. The three brothers were sitting on the sofa chatting. Hearing the child's cry, they knew what was going on. Chapter 1091. After putting up the couplets, Su Qianxi and Qin Shuhua had already prepared dinner. The family sat together and ate happily. Captain Li looked at his children and grandchildren with a smile on his face. The atmosphere at Yu Lily's place was completely different from that of the Li family. O Ming's parents were very concerned about this holiday. O Ming could do whatever he wanted for the 365 days of the year, but on this day, he had to have a family reunion dinner at home before going to do his own things. For more than 30 years, there had been no exceptions. When Yu Lily woke up early in the morning, her side was already empty. There was a note on the bedside table. It was O Ming's handwriting. On it was written, There is breakfast on the table. Eat it when it's hot. Did O Ming buy it on purpose? She got up and found that her cotton pajamas were wrinkled and a little messy, but they were still intact. After washing up, she went to the dining room to eat and went back to her room to paint. She painted like that for the whole day. Yu Lily continued to paint until she felt hungry. She then opened the curtains in the room. However, when she opened the curtains, she found that the surroundings were already dark. In winter, the sky darkened early. Yu Lily looked at the time. It was only 5 p.m. After changing and putting on some light makeup, Yu Lily had a quick meal downstairs before taking a taxi to the place she had arranged to meet Su Qianxi. The art exhibition that Su Qianxi had arranged was held by an artist who had become particularly famous in recent years. He was famous for his personality and his poverty. It was said that the artist was already middle-aged, but he had no wife. It was said that the artist had no family, but he had friends everywhere. He wandered around and left his name everywhere. His name was Wan Fenglin. He was a very unique and frank uncle. He was truly talented. The things that he painted were very distinctive. He liked to combine landscapes and flowers to depict everything. Yu Lily had only found out about this artist when she was looking for inspiration for his style. People called him the wandering artist. It was 1858 when she took a taxi to the venue. Su Qianxi had a habit of always arriving earlier. No matter what kind of date it was or who it was with, it had always been like this. So when she got out of the car, Yu Lily looked around, but she couldn't find Su Qianxi. When Yu Lily was about to call and ask where Su Qianxi was, her shoulder suddenly felt warm and heavy. Yu Lily paused, then turned off the screen of her phone. When she was about to speak, she saw the face behind her. All the words were instantly stuck in her throat. The face behind him was handsome and devilish. A pair of bright almond-shaped eyes sparkled as he looked at Yu Lily and asked, Have you waited long? Yu Lily blinked her eyes in a daze. After a long while, she reacted and asked, Why are you here? Why can't it be me? O Ming raised his eyebrows slightly. Let's go. The art exhibition is about to begin. His warm palm took Yu Lily's hand and led her inside without saying a word. Yu Lily was still in a daze when she entered the venue. She asked, Today is New Year's Eve. I know. O Ming turned his head. On his slightly evil face, the corners of his lips curled up into an indescribable gentleness. That's why I came to find you. Chapter 1092. A little bit. O Ming seemed to be in a good mood. He pulled her inside. When I saw my woman at the back, I felt that I was special. My woman. Yu Lily rolled her eyes at him, and snorted as she turned her head away. However, there was a faint smile on the corners of her lips. There were faint dimples on both sides of her cheeks. The atmosphere was beautifully decorated by such joy. Ming pulled her in and paid the tickets. The two of them walked side by side into the Kingstown Art Exhibition Center. It was New Year's Eve. For the wandering artist, it might not be a big holiday, but for many people, it was a very important day. The day was the time for gatherings. But, at night, there were many people who came to the art exhibition. As soon as she entered, Lily was captivated by the unique technique of the first painting. Beside it, there was a sign with the words, "When Feng Lin's famous work wins first prize at the International Art Competition." The title of the painting was, "The Most Beautiful." At first glance, it was a colorful scene with flowers clustered around it. But upon closer inspection, there was another kind of beauty to it. The lines of the flowers outlined a flock of birds, like swallows and butterflies. From afar, it looked like a young girl sleeping soundly. Her eyes were closed, and her long curly hair was tied up. Her beautiful figure was clearly outlined. It was as if a skirt was swaying in the wind. It was as if the young girl in front of him was the flower, the bird, and the butterfly. The lines were perfectly blended, without the slightest sense of incongruity. One look was enough to stun the world. Every part of it was exquisite beyond compare. Every single pattern was just a slightly more exquisite illustration. But when these ordinary illustrations were put together, they became a painting that was enough to make everyone gasp in admiration. Lily couldn't help but move closer to the railing to take a closer look. Beautiful! It was indeed the most beautiful. Lily had never seen such a stunning painting. There was such a painting on the internet, but it was compressed by various websites. It was not as stunning as seeing the real thing up close. Lily was slightly dazed and couldn't help but say, "It's so beautiful." Ming nodded his head. His eyes couldn't help but be attracted to it. "It's very beautiful." As he spoke, a pair of eyes quietly moved to Lily, full of tenderness. Lily looked for a while and found that two girls were constantly taking photos. One of them said, "You're amazing to be able to get such a ticket. Send me the photos later. I'm going to post them on my WeChat moments to show off." Lily's tranquil mood, which had been brought by the painting in front of her, disappeared without a trace in such words. Such a beautiful work of art was so beautiful that it transcended the mortal world. Saying such a thing was undoubtedly a great blasphemy to it. Lily looked up at the words on the bulletin board. It was clearly said, "No photos are allowed." Lily seemed to have found a reason to speak, so she stepped forward and said with a little anger, "It seems that it has been clearly stated that no photos are allowed. Can't you see it? Mr. Painter didn't put his painting here for you to take pictures and post them on your moments." Chapter 1093. When Lily was about to say something, her hand was pulled by Ming, and without a word, they walked inside. Lily didn't understand, so she turned to look at Ming. Ming's footsteps were a little fast. After he pulled her inside, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Silly girl, you are too impulsive. If they want to take pictures, let them take pictures. If you talk about them like that, you might be recognized." When Lily heard that, she suddenly reacted. She was a little surprised and covered her mouth, feeling a little annoyed. "I forgot." Ming was a little helpless, so he pulled her inside. The exhibition center was very big, and there were a lot of paintings hanging. As Lily and Ming walked in, they were attracted by all kinds of paintings, but the style was the same and beautiful. Whether it was the brushwork or the color, they couldn't help but be amazed. That day was New Year's Eve, so there were a lot of people in Kingstown. However, such an art exhibition wasn't something that just anyone could attend. Although there were a lot of people along the way, compared to the sea of people outside, it was quiet and relaxed. Seeing the end, Lily still felt a little unsatisfied. Every painting was very exquisite and beautiful. "There's another pair here," someone called out from behind. Lily instinctively turned her head around to look. It was a woman who looked like she was wearing expensive clothes. Hearing the woman say that, the people who were originally behind the woman all walked up. However, their footsteps were obviously not as long as any of the paintings in front of them. After a few glances, they turned and walked away. Behind them, another group of people went up, but the result was the same. Lily couldn't help but go up and look at the paintings closely. All the paintings in front of her looked colorful, bold, and full of personality. From the paintings, one could imagine that this wandering artist was a very bold and unruly person. All the paintings along the way were of women, and there were even paintings of men and women together naked. Bold, beautiful, and a little erotic. However, this final painting was much simpler than any of the previous ones. In fact, it could even be said that this painting was completely out of place compared to the previous ones. Yu Lily heard Oh Ming's questioning voice, and she couldn't help but go forward to take a closer look. The entire painting was beige in color, from all sides to the inside, from light to dark. At the very center, the light beige color had already turned into a light brown color, forming an umbilical cord. The faint lines outlined a baby, sucking on his fingers with his eyes closed. There was filth on his body, which looked like bloodstains. However, it was different from the misty lines in the previous paintings. The lines in this painting were very clear, and the colors were darker. Even his brushwork and colors were completely different. It was as if it was painted by another person. When Oh Ming saw this, he raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "This shouldn't have been painted by the same person, right? The difference between their styles is too big." Yu Lily looked at the painting in front of her and said, "It was painted by a single person." As she spoke, she leaned closer to look at the paper. The overall color of the painting is beige, but the paper doesn't look like it's made in modern times. It must have been painted a long time ago. What do you know? An explosive shout rang out without the slightest bit of precaution. The voice was very familiar. Both Oh Ming and Yu Lily felt their hearts skip a beat in shock. Chapter 1094. Both Yu Lily and Oh Ming turned their heads almost at the same time. When they saw the person behind them, Oh Ming couldn't believe it and cried out, "Mom!" Yu Lily had never met Xiao Ziqing, but she had heard her voice. However, when she heard Oh Ming's shout, her heart skipped a beat. Subconsciously, she wanted to hide. Looking at Xiao Ziqing in front of her, she unconsciously took a step back. Xiao Ziqing looked at Oh Ming in front of her and said angrily, "Didn't you say you were going to meet Li Ziqing? Is this Li Ziqing?" Hearing Xiao Ziqing's words, Yu Lily suddenly felt a little sad. His chest tightened, and he turned to look at Oh Ming. Oh Ming was speechless for a while. When he saw the eyes around him, his face quickly darkened. He said, "Mom, this is an art exhibition. If you have anything to say, let's talk about it at home." "Little Xiao, why are you so angry? If you have something to say it nicely." A middle-aged man's voice came from behind Xiao Ziqing. His voice sounded a little hoarse, as if he had a sore throat. Following the voice, Zhang Xian saw a middle-aged man. He looked to be in his 40s or 50s and wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses. His gray hair was tied behind his head. He walked over with a smile on his face. There were 2 dimples on both sides of his cheeks, and he looked very peaceful. He was slightly plump and wore an old-fashioned gray Chinese tunic suit. It was very clean and tidy, but it also looked very unique. On his slightly rough left hand was a slightly black silver ring. It was a simple design, but on his hand, it was indescribably fitting. Xiao Ziqing turned her head and saw Wen Fenglin. Her anger flared as she said, "How can I not be angry? This is the woman I told you about who keeps pestering my son. Of all the things she could have done at such a young age, why did she choose to be a mistress? Didn't your parents teach you to have self-respect? You even encouraged my son to lie. What Li Ziqing? He was just fooling around with you." When Oh Ming heard that, his originally respectful expression immediately darkened. He took a step forward and hid Yu Lily behind him. With some dissatisfaction he yelled, "Mom, what you said is too unpleasant to listen to. She's my girlfriend now, not some mistress." "Huh. You're actually talking back to me for this woman. Do you even know who I am?" Xiao Ziqing was so angry that her eyes turned red. She wanted to go up and teach Oh Ming a lesson, but she was held back by the people behind her. She turned around and saw that it was Wen Fenglin. Wen Fenglin tugged at her coat and gently tugged it back. "Let's talk this out. Xiao Qiao, you weren't such a rash person in the past. Why are you so impulsive now? You don't understand the situation at all. This woman is too much. Not only did she make my son fall head over heels for her, she even set a trap." "Enough." Wen Fenglin cut off Xiao Ziqing's voice. The words that were on the tip of Xiao Ziqing's tongue stopped abruptly. The people around them heard the commotion and looked over. The smile on Wen Fenglin's face was no longer there. He said, "If you have anything to say, let's talk inside." Yu Lily stood in the same place, feeling uncomfortable. Chapter 1095. Misunderstanding? I don't think it's something that can be resolved with just a simple sentence. Yu Lily's eyes darkened when she heard that. She looked up at Ming and saw his serious expression. She nodded her head. More and more people were looking over. Ming covered Yu Lily and followed Wen Fenglin into the room. It was a lounge with 2 easels. On the table next to it, there were not only paints for painting, but also a bunch of colored pencils and markers. After Wen Fenglin closed the door and windows, Chao Ziqing couldn't hold it in any longer. She turned around and saw Ming escorting Yu Lily into the room. Her anger flared up. This kid is crazy. He's actually been bewitched by a vixen. How can such a woman be worthy of the family? How can she be worthy of Ming? Chao Ziqing walked forward and pulled her son over forcefully. She shouted, "Xiao, go home first. I have something to say to this young lady." This, young lady. There wasn't anything wrong with that form of address. But in Yu Lily's ears, it was so piercing. Looking at Chao Ziqing before her, she realized that this rich madam's face didn't hide her disgust at all. Her eyes were filled with contempt and disdain. It was exactly the same as the way Li Da's wife had looked at her back in the imperial capital. But Chao Ziqing's eyes were even more blatant and disgusted than that woman's. Yu Lily didn't feel good in her heart, but on the surface, she still maintained the calmness from before. "Mom, if there's anything you want to say, we can talk it out face to face. There's no need to ask me to leave. I think you have some misunderstanding about Yu Lily." "Misunderstanding?" Chao Ziqing looked at her coldly. "There's no misunderstanding. Xiao, you're blinded by the situation. What's so good about this woman? She has no upbringing, no culture, and no inner qualities. Does she think she can seduce my son just because she has a pretty face?" With just a few tricks up her sleeve, she was able to bring Shen Manting and Shen Luo down together. She was indeed formidable. But such a vicious woman must never be allowed into their family. Chao Ziqing looked at Yu Lily with an even more indescribable disgust and impatience. "I like her, so I'm willing to be with her. Yu Lily is a very good girl. You must have some misunderstandings about her. There are some things that we can discuss at home. I'll explain them to you slowly when we get back." "Mom," Ming's mood dropped even further, and he said in a low voice, "I know exactly what I'm doing." "There's no need," Chao Ziqing shouted. "Fenglin is my good friend, not an outsider." With that, she looked in Wen Fenglin's direction and said, "Fenglin, this is my son. His name is O." Based on Ming's current reputation and achievements, Wen Fenglin had long heard of his name. He smiled and nodded at Ming. He extended his hand and said, "The younger generation will surpass the older. I'm Wen Fenglin." "Hello. Hello, Mr. Wen." Ming gently shook Wen Fenglin's hand but quickly let go. "What, Mr. Wen? Call him Uncle Wen," Chao Ziqing corrected. Ming didn't immediately change his words. He looked at Chao Ziqing with an unhappy expression and said, "Mom, there are some things we should talk about when we get back. It's not convenient to talk outside." Chapter 1096. Chao Ziqing's words were impolite. Every word was filled with disgust for Yu Lily. Yu Lily calmed herself down and said, "Auntie?" "What, Auntie? Didn't your mother teach you not to address me as you please? Call me Mrs. O." Chao Ziqing's words were harsh. When Ming heard that, his face darkened. He called out, "Mom." But Chao Ziqing didn't give him a chance to finish his sentence. She cut him off and looked at Yu Lily. In a sharp voice, she said, "Before Manting became the future daughter-in-law of the O family, she called me Auntie. Do you think you can be on equal footing with Manting?" In Chao Ziqing's eyes, she couldn't. Such words were obviously disdainful and humiliating. It was extremely disrespectful. It was the most humiliating thing Yu Lily had ever heard in her life. Even what Ming had said in the past couldn't compare to the humiliation that Chao Ziqing's words had inflicted on her. Just as she was about to retort, she heard the middle-aged man's voice. The smile on Wen Fenglin's face had long disappeared. He said, Xiao, you've gone overboard with your words. Regardless of why you hate this lady so much, everyone should be equal. Isn't it inappropriate for you to categorize them in such a manner? Wen Fenglin asked. When Xiao Ziqing heard that, she subconsciously recalled the background of Wen Fenglin and her best friend. Her voice faltered, and she quickly said, Fenglin, I didn't mean anything by it. Regardless of whether you meant anything by it or not, don't you think it's a little cruel to treat a child this way? Wen Fenglin's eyes were filled with regret. This child looks much younger than your son. Xiao, if you have anything to say, calm down and say it. Because you would never know which sentence you would say would become a lifetime of pain for the child. It would become the key to their separation. When Xiao Ziqing saw Wen Fenglin's expression, she knew that she might have said the wrong thing. She waved her hand and said, Fenglin, sit down and talk calmly, Wen Fenglin said. I'll get someone to brew some tea. There's no need, Fenglin. Wen Fenglin had already turned around and walked to the door of the lounge. There's no need, Mr. Wen, Yu Lily called out. When Wen Fenglin heard Yu Lily's voice, he froze on the spot and turned his head. Yu Lily continued, I don't think I have anything to say to Oming's mother. As she spoke, she looked at Xiao Ziqing and said, Auntie, to me, other than being Oming's mother, you are not worthy of any respect. His voice was sonorous as he looked at Xiao Ziqing. There was no hesitation in his words, and there was a hint of anger in them. Xiao Ziqing was so angry that she laughed. What? Oming was shocked. He quickly covered her mouth and said, What are you talking about? Don't say it. Xiao Ziqing was a person who couldn't take criticism. At home, even Oming's father didn't dare to say anything to her. Over the years, Xiao Ziqing had been spoiled. Coupled with her rapid rise in status, ordinary people rarely spoke to her like this. Xiao Ziqing already had a bad opinion of Yu Lily. If she were to say that out loud, she was afraid. Chapter 1097. Seeing that Xiao Ziqing was obviously going to explode, Oming closed his eyes and cursed in his heart. Yu Lily removed Oming's hand and continued, It was my fault for calling you auntie just now. I thought that you were an elder, but the way you have always spoken doesn't make me feel like an elder. I think an elder should have the attitude of an elder to teach the younger generation. But, with all due respect, this is the first time I've met you. Apart from your age, I don't see any of the attitude of an elder. In other words, she was saying that Xiao Ziqing was taking advantage of her seniority. Even women couldn't stand being called old, let alone Xiao Ziqing. Shut up. Xiao Ziqing was furious. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to lecture me? I don't have the right to lecture you, Yu Lily said. I'm just saying what I think. I think what I said is the same as you saying that I can't be on equal footing with Shen Manting, right? Xiao Ziqing was so angry that her face turned red. She said angrily, What I said is the truth. What I said is also the truth. Yu Lily's eyes darkened. She continued, We are all honest people. You say the truth, and I say the truth. Then we are even. But, could they really be even? From the beginning, the disparity between her and Oming's mother's status was huge. Now, her behavior was undoubtedly lowering her image in front of Oming's mother. It was unfair. However, such an action made Yu Lily's mood, which had been depressed for a long time, relax for a moment. She felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. Xiao Ziqing was so angry that she laughed. Do you know what you are saying? You are cutting off your own path. I can't let you into my family. You want to be with my son? In your dreams. She had expected it. But, hearing this, Yu Lily still felt suffocated. Uncomfortable. She wanted to be with Oming. She really wanted to be with him. But, regardless of identity, background or values, she was incompatible with this family. Looking at Xiao Ziqing, who seemed to have the upper hand, Yu Lily felt a little funny. Could it be that if I didn't say anything, you would let me be with Oming? Dream on. Xiao Ziqing sneered. My son will never marry a woman like you. If others were to find out that our son had married a woman like you, they would probably laugh at us. So the result is the same. Yu Lily smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her smile. Auntie, I'm sorry. Xiao Ziqing was even more pleased with herself. She looked at Yu Lily and coldly said, There's no use regretting it. I will never accept you. You misunderstood. I mean, I'm sorry that O Ming has a mother like you. The smugness in Qiao Ziqing's heart vanished without a trace as she snapped coldly. What do you mean by that? All right. O Ming interrupted them with a sullen face. He grabbed Yu Lily and said in a cold voice, Anyway, my mother is an elder. Yu Lily, apologize to my mother. Apologize. Hearing that, Yu Lily pursed her lips and looked up at him. O Ming's pair of bright peach blossom eyes hid a deep and incomprehensible emotion. On one side was her mother, on the other side was her lover. How could she choose? Chapter 1098. Yu Lily suddenly found it funny. She chuckled and said, O Ming, I'm sorry. O Ming's heart sank when he heard that. At the same time, he saw that on her seemingly smiling face, there seemed to be an unconcealable sadness. In the depths of that smile, there was disappointment. O Ming's heart skipped a beat. He gave her a meaningful look and lowered his eyes. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to my mother. Apologize. Otherwise, what will happen in the future? Apologize. Otherwise, my mother will bear a grudge against me. He wouldn't marry someone else, and he wouldn't let me marry someone else. Qiao Ziqing had never been a magnanimous person. If he gave her a way out of this embarrassing situation, there might be room for redemption in the future. If things really became that bad, then what will happen in the future? But Yu Lily couldn't read his eyes. She vaguely felt that O Ming had something to say, but the grievance in her heart had already surpassed her reason. Yu Lily laughed and said, I'm sorry. I don't think I said anything wrong. Besides, Yu Lily. O Ming shouted and interrupted her. He put his hands on her shoulders and looked at her imploringly. Apologize. It's the new year. Don't make the elders unhappy, okay? Yu Lily could clearly see the emotions in O Ming's eyes. Her heart trembled. This guy. What does he mean? For my mother? What does that expression mean? O Ming's back was facing Qiao Ziqing. That angle also happened to block Yu Lily's view. Yu Lily only heard Qiao Ziqing laugh coldly and say with some disdain, Xiao O, do you still expect her to apologize to me? If such a girl had intended to apologize to me, she wouldn't have said so many rude words just now. It's too late to make up for it now. It's too late to make up for it now. Yes, if I apologize, isn't it the same as making up for it? Moreover, this woman was so overbearing. Even if he apologized, she might not forgive him. She might even say a lot of nasty things. Just like, O Ming. After all, they are mother and son. Their personalities and mouths were so similar. Yu Lily chuckled and took his hands away. She looked at Qiao Ziqing coldly and said, as Mr. Wen said, everyone is equal. Your mother is an elder, but not an elder. I don't think I'm wrong. Enough. The middle-aged man's voice sounded a little hoarse. Wen Fenglin's voice was calm. He looked at Yu Lily and said, Xiao Qiao, it's true that you were in the wrong today. But, young lady, your temper is too bad. No matter what, this is your boyfriend's mother. How could Yu Lily not know that? When she heard Wen Fenglin's words, she found it strange. Xiao Qiao, calm down. You've lived for decades, after all. Don't make such a fuss on New Year's Eve. Today is my art exhibition, and I thank all of you for your support. But, if word gets out about this, I, Wen Fenglin, won't be able to keep my face. Wen Fenglin's voice carried a hint of a smile as he spoke. His eyes, which had thick, double-lidded eyes, seemed to be filled with longing. Dimples appeared on both sides of his cheeks, and his smile was infectious. Although he had a smile on his face, he exuded an indescribable sense of dignity. He was peaceful, yet intimidating. Chapter 1099. Is this uncle just a wandering painter? His aura, as well as the aura and authority that he exuded when he spoke, made him look extraordinary. She had thought that the legendary painter was just an unkempt uncle. Unkempt, unshaven, reeking of alcohol, or hunched over, he looked like an ordinary person. But Wen Fenglin was completely different. As expected, the moment Wen Fenglin spoke, Qiao Ziqing shut her mouth and didn't say another word. Wen Fenglin smiled at Yu Lily and said, Young people shouldn't be so hot-tempered. Go outside and get some fresh air. Xiao, aren't you going to take your girlfriend out? No way. Xiao Ziqing immediately shouted. She reached out and tugged at Ming. Xiao, come back with me. It's New Year's Eve. What's the meaning of fooling around with an outsider? Go home now. Outsider. Fooling around. When Lily heard those two words, she felt even more uncomfortable. Ming flung Xiao Ziqing's hand away and said, Mom, you and Uncle Wen haven't seen each other in a long time. You two should catch up. As he spoke, he pulled Lily out of the house. Xiao Ziqing was furious and shouted, Xiao, where are you going now? But Ming didn't reply. He just pulled Lily out. Xiao Ziqing instinctively wanted to chase after them, but Wen Fenglin held her back. Wen Fenglin looked in the direction they had left and said, Xiao, the children are all grown up. You shouldn't interfere so much. Let them sort it out themselves. You don't know the situation at all. That woman is very bad. She was an orphan from a young age. She didn't have parents. Not only is her upbringing lacking, but she's also very vicious. She was the one who exposed the incident with Shen Manting and Shen Luoan. What incident? Wen Fenglin frowned. Xiao Ziqing briefly explained the incident. When she was done, she said angrily, that woman's motives are impure. She was in the capital for 4 years. Who knows how many people trampled on her in those 4 years? I won't let such a woman into our family. Absolutely not. Xiao Ziqing's tone was firm. Wen Fenglin could hear the seriousness in her words. Wen Fenglin furrowed his brows and said, How could that be? That girl doesn't seem like that sort of person. She's that kind of person. Sigh, Fenglin, you haven't been in Kingstown for too long. You don't know that the girls here are different from the people you've interacted with. I don't think so. As Wen Fenglin spoke, he seemed to recall something and asked, Oh, right. You mentioned earlier that this lady is actually an orphan? Yes. But I seem to have heard you mention her mother several times just now. Did I hear wrong? Xiao Ziqing froze for a moment before she scoffed coldly and said, I did it on purpose. I know she doesn't have a mother, so there's no one to discipline her, So, you purposely picked on her sore spot? Wen Fenglin was amused. He looked at Xiao Ziqing helplessly and said, You haven't changed at all. If Xian'er were still here, she'd definitely want to beat you up. Hearing the name Xian'er, Xiao Ziqing felt a little lonely. She said, Fenglin, I miss her so much. Chapter 1100. This was the worst New Year's Eve that Lily had ever had. Lily had never been so depressed on New Year's Eve in her 25 years of life. After being pulled out by Ming, the two of them went straight outside. There were a lot of people outside, and it was bustling. Lily shivered as the cold air hit her. Ming held her in his arms and whispered, Are you cold? Lily pushed him away with some resistance, lowered her head, and walked forward. Ming had already reached out to grab her, but Lily's pace was a little fast, and there were a lot of people, so she was pushed away. Lily! Ming shouted, but Lily didn't look back, and walked through the crowd. Ming pushed through the crowd and chased after her. His eyes were fixed on Lily's back, for fear of losing her. But Lily's pace became faster and faster, and soon she was out on the road. She strode forward and squeezed into the queue for the subway. When Ming saw that, he became anxious and shouted, Lily, stop! But there were too many people, and it was too noisy. Ming's shout was quickly drowned out by the crowd, and it didn't cause the slightest ripple. Ming followed her all the way to the line and watched her enter the subway station. She took out a subway card from nowhere and easily swiped it to enter the station. When Ming saw that, he was a little confused and shouted, Lily! But Lily was still indifferent, as if she didn't hear what he said. Watching Lily get off the escalator, he sighed. He reached into his pocket, intending to take out his cell phone to call Lily, but it was empty. Not only the phone, but even the black wallet that had been quietly lying in his pocket had disappeared without a trace at the same time. Looking at the bustling crowd in front of him, Ming sighed heavily. It was past 8 o'clock in the evening, the rush hour of the New Year's Eve. When the subway arrived, Lily had no time to move, and she was squeezed onto the train by a bunch of people. At the next station, Yu Lily couldn't hear the announcement at all, and she was directly squeezed out of the train by the crowd. And she hadn't even arrived at the station. Yu Lily watched helplessly as the doors of the train closed and left. Her heart felt like it was being crushed by a rock. He opened his bag and took out his phone. However, not a single phone call. Not even a text message. Bastard. He didn't even make a phone call? Thinking of how he had asked her to apologize, Yu Lily felt a dull pain in her heart. 2 more buses passed by, but Yu Lily couldn't get on either. On the 3rd trip, he finally went up. When he got home, it was already past 9 o'clock. A tall figure stood at the door. He was wearing a dark suit with dark patterns underneath a long black windbreaker. When he saw Yu Lily walking over, he straightened up and asked, "Why are you back so late? Where did you go?" When Yu Lily saw him, she didn't want to talk to him at all. She took out her keys and opened the door. Oh Ming watched her open the door. Just as she was about to close the door, he blocked it with his hand and walked in. Yu Lily originally just wanted to throw a little tantrum. Seeing that she couldn't stop him, she simply ignored him and let him come in. She turned around and prepared to go back to her room. Chapter 11:01. There was a touch of grievance in her voice, which sounded quite coquettish. Hearing that, Yu Lily turned her head and looked at him in surprise. As soon as she turned her head, she met Oh Ming's dark brown eyes. They were very deep, bright, and so beautiful that it made people lose their minds. Oh Ming buried his face in her neck and whispered, "My legs are so sore. Give me a massage." How could it be stolen? I don't know. I put it in my coat pocket. I wanted to call you, but I found it was gone. Oh Ming's voice was low. Fortunately, I have a good memory. I knew your house was here, so I walked for more than 20 minutes. I didn't expect you to arrive later than me. Yu Lily was about to speak, but Oh Ming took her hand and touched his thigh. With a coquettish voice she whispered, "Sore." Yu Lily lost her temper. After pulling her hand back, she glared at him and then pulled him into the room. Closing the door, Yu Lily walked in, loosened the muscles and bones of her hands, and said, "Lie down, and I will give you a massage." "Okay." Oh Ming smiled and took off his suit jacket. Then he pulled Yu Lily's pillow over and lay down. Yu Lily also took off her coat, then took off his shoes and socks, and began to massage his legs. Oh Ming originally just wanted to make her feel better, but he didn't expect that Yu Lily's skill was really good. "It's so comfortable." Oh Ming squinted and looked down at her. Yu Lily lowered her head, and her face was indescribably serious. Her eyebrows were lowered, her lips were pursed, and her face was decorated with light makeup. Under the soft light in the room, she looked even more gentle and peaceful. So beautiful. Today's Yu Lily was even more beautiful than before. Yu Lily seemed to notice his gaze and looked up at him. Then she lowered her head and said while massaging, "When I was in the capital, I had a beauty salon." Oh Ming didn't know there was such a story, so he was a little surprised and asked, "Why didn't you do it later?" That beauty salon's business was not good, so it closed down. Later I went to work as a computer. While speaking, she put her legs together and massaged Oh Ming's calves. Just by listening to it, Oh Ming could tell that it wasn't easy. He reached out to hold her hand, and Yu Lily's movements stopped. She looked up and saw the softness on Oh Ming's face. Oh Ming took her hand and let her lean on his chest. He held her in his arms and whispered, "From now on you can just draw at home. I'm just painting now." Yu Lily placed her hands on his chest and looked up at him. "My life is much better than before. Even without you I can still live. Even without you, I can still live very well." There was nothing they couldn't get through. It was impossible for anyone to not be able to survive without each other. There was a look of pity on Oh Ming's face, and he gently stroked her hair. Yu Lily's hair grew very fast, and now it reached her neck. Her bangs covered her eyebrows, making her face look smaller and thinner. "It'll be better in the future, I promise." Hearing that, Yu Lily's lips curled up. She leaned forward and lowered her head to kiss him on the lips. Chapter 11:02. The passionate kiss was overwhelming. Yu Lily placed her hands on his chest and passionately responded to his passion. His lips gradually moved down from her lips to her chin, her jaw, her earlobe, the tip of her ear. Her skin, which was already fair and tender, gradually turned pink under the heat. His big hands gently unbuttoned her blouse and wandered around her wantonly. Lily narrowed her eyes and moved her hands up his chest. One hand circled his neck, and the other hand gently unbuttoned his shirt. They had known each other for a long, long time. Many things didn't need to be said. They had a tacit understanding. The temperature in the room was very high, and both of them were covered with a thin layer of moisture. However, at the last step, Lily suddenly stopped and pushed him away. Oh Ming's peach blossom eyes were full of lust. At the same time, he was confused and confused. Looking at Lily's nervous expression, he asked, "What's wrong? Today is New Year's Eve. Why don't you go home? Your mother seems a little fierce. Don't go back and encourage your father to hit you." Hearing that, Oh Ming laughed and reached out to pinch her nose. He said helplessly, "You're exaggerating. You'd better go home. After all, today is New Year's Eve." In the past, Oh Ming had never spent New Year's Eve with Lily. Even when they were together like today, it had never happened before. It was because of Oh Ming's upbringing that he had persisted for so many years. This year, his mother knew that he was with her. If he didn't go home, he was afraid that his fate would be very ugly. As for Oh Ming, when he heard this, he automatically understood it to mean something else. Looking at the woman under him, Oh Ming's eyes seemed to be covered with a thin layer of mist. He leaned down slightly and touched her cheek with his big hand. His thumb gently rubbed her face. His voice was a little hoarse because of his lust. He whispered, "Are you not ready yet? Are you cold? Not cured yet?" Lily blinked and shook her head. "No." When Oh Ming heard that word, he calmed down. He bowed his head and sealed the rest of her words in her mouth. At the same time, with one move, Lily groaned and subconsciously reached out to hug him. Her breathing became rapid. Oh Ming released her and stopped moving. He asked, "Does it hurt?" Lily's breathing quickened as she replied, "It doesn't hurt." "Huh. Oh." Oh Ming opened his mouth and bit her collarbone. His voice was muffled as he said, "I'm not going back today. Let's spend the new year together." When Lily heard that, she was secretly happy and unconsciously raised her lips. She opened her eyes and noticed that Oh Ming was also looking at her. Lily felt a little uncomfortable and passively withstood his attack. Waves of feeling came over her, and her hands holding him tightened. Gasping for air, Lily stuttered, "That New Year's isn't like this. What's it like?" Compared to Lily, Oh Ming's voice was much more normal. It made Lily's face heat up. But she still hugged him and said, "New Year, watch the Spring Festival Gala. Countdown. New Year. Ah, slow down." Chapter 1103. Lily was shocked. She quickly refused and said, "No." However, Oh Ming had already picked her up. "No, no." Lily clung to him tightly and whispered, "Stay inside. We can go out when we're done. What if Yi Qianqian suddenly comes back?" "She won't come back. She went home for the new year." "No." Lily resisted loudly and clamped her legs together. "Stay inside or I'll..." "You'll what?" Oh Ming asked with a smile. "I'll bite you." Because Oh Ming didn't make any big movements, Lily's voice was much clearer. When Oh Ming heard that, he raised his eyebrows slightly and put her back on the bed. "If you want me, I'll fulfill your wish." Ha. Lily was about to speak, but then she couldn't say anything. Lily had no idea how many times she had done it, but she was exhausted. Her eyelids drooped, and she felt sleepy. Oh Ming pulled a shirt and put it on. Then, he carried her to the bathroom and helped her bathe and wipe her body. After the two of them finished bathing together, Oh Ming carried her back again. He put on a shirt. When he came back to his senses, Lily was already asleep. Smiling, Oh Ming looked at the time. It was already past 11:40. There were only 10 minutes left until the first day of the new year. After putting on the shirt, he carried her to the living room and turned on the TV. Many TVs were broadcasting the Spring Festival Gala. This is the atmosphere of the new year. When he turned around, Lily had already opened her eyes and was watching the TV. Oh Ming held her in his arms and said, "The countdown is about to start. Does this count as us spending 2 years together?" Yu Lily turned her head away and snorted. She closed her eyes slightly, but her lips were full of smiles. Oh Ming put her on his lap, held her hand in his, and played with her fingers. He said, "Tonight, you and my mother had a bit of a fight. My mother is a person who cares a lot about her reputation. You contradicted her like that, so she will definitely bear a grudge against you. That's why I asked you to apologize to her." She looked into his eyes, and his eyes moved from her fingers to her face. "That Uncle One is my mother's best friend. However, it was my first time seeing him. Fortunately, he helped me out of the situation. Otherwise, it would have been even uglier." As she spoke, she sighed faintly. "Why can't you read my eyes? Next time when I ask you to do something in front of my mother, you must listen to me. Otherwise, it won't be easy in the future." His words made it clear that he was treating Yu Lily as a member of the O family. But Yu Lily looked down and said, "Your mother hates me very much. I could tell from the many things she said last night that she was deliberately trying to embarrass me. I will make her accept you." Oh Ming turned her face in his hands and said, "Let's have a child. When the time comes, she will have to accept you even if she doesn't want to." Speaking of this, Oh Ming lowered his eyes to look at her lower abdomen. He gently stroked it and said, "Could it be that my child is already here?" Yu Lily also bowed her head, feeling a little magical. She reached out and placed her hand on his. She even calmed down to feel it. After all, from the time they met until now, they had only done it a few times. But each time, they had not taken any protective measures. Could it be that without knowing it, I am already pregnant? Chapter 1104. Marriage. What a sacred word. All Yu Lily wanted was to marry Oh Ming and be with him forever. She looked up and found that Oh Ming had been looking at her. His peach blossom eyes were bright at that moment. It looked like 2 bright mirrors, clearly reflecting her, and only her. "Let's welcome the new year. There are only 30 seconds left." The infectious voice came from the television. When Oh Ming heard it, he smiled and said, "The countdown has begun." Yu Lily felt a little magical. She snuggled into his arms and whispered, "This seems to be the first time we're celebrating the new year together." "Yes." Oh Ming gazed at her and kissed her on the cheek. "For the next 50 times, we'll be together. 10, 9, 8, 7. Oh Ming kissed her on the lips. The person on the television was still shouting, 3, 2, 1. Oh Ming released her and said in a low voice, "Happy New Year." Yu Lily felt a lump in her throat. She hugged him and replied, "Happy New Year." Oh Ming chuckled. After turning off the television, he carried her back to the room. When Yu Lily woke up, the sky was already bright. Yu Lily felt a sense of security when she felt the warmth from his body. She reached out and hugged him. Yu Lily burrowed into his arms. Oh Ming was awakened by her. When he opened a corner of his eyes, he saw her dark head. The corners of his lips curled up a little. He stretched out his long legs and placed them on top of her. With a hook, the two of them were pressed together seamlessly. Yu Lily maintained that position for a while. Soon, she couldn't take it anymore. She moved and said, "It's uncomfortable." Oh Ming released her and said, "It's the first day of the new year. Where do you want to go?" When Yu Lily heard that, she looked up at him. All she saw was his slightly pale chin. She poked it with her finger and asked, "Don't you need to go home?" His chin was tickled by her poking. Oh Ming grabbed her naughty hand and asked, "Do you want to go?" "No." "Then don't go." Oh Ming looked down at her and whispered, "Are you hungry?" "I'm not hungry." When Oh Ming heard that, he nodded slightly in satisfaction. His big hand slipped into her clothes, and he said in a low and charming voice, "Then let's do some exercise." "No." "Ah, it's itchy, don't touch there, N." After the shower, Yu Lily couldn't stand the hunger. After the two of them got dressed, Yu Lily wiped something on her face and prepared to leave. Oh Ming was still wearing the same clothes as yesterday. After Yu Lily came out, they went downstairs together. There were many restaurants nearby. After the two of them ate a little and walked out, they inadvertently saw a flashy Bentley driving to the entrance of their neighborhood. Such a car was not something that ordinary people could afford to drive. Yu Lily looked at the car and found it familiar. On the other hand, Ming had obviously recognized the owner of the car. He pulled Yu Lily along and whispered, "Let's go." "Stop right there." Qiao Ziqing's voice rang out, and it shocked Yu Lily. He turned around and saw Qiao Ziqing dressed in a pink fur coat and elegant makeup. She was very eye-catching. He was looking for Ming. Chapter 11:05. Yu Lily was a little confused when she heard that. Was this guy serious? Isn't he supposed to be obedient to his mother? Now he wants to elope? Before Yu Lily could react, she was pulled by Ming and ran forward. Ming's legs were long and fast, so he ran very fast. Yu Lily couldn't keep up with him when he pulled her. She stumbled and almost fell. Ming's eyes and hands were sharp. He immediately caught Yu Lily and saved her from falling. When Ming's mother saw their behavior, she was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She shouted, "Ming, get back here!" But it was Ming who had instigated it. How could he stop? No matter how loud Qiao Ziqing shouted, Ming had no intention of stopping. Instead, he pulled Yu Lily farther and farther away. Little B****. Qiao Ziqing's face was red with anger. She turned back to the car and said, "Catch up! Hurry up!" The luxurious Bentley was immediately started and chased in the direction that Ming and Yu Lily were running. It was close to the train tracks. When Yu Lily was pulled across the tracks by Ming, she always felt a sense of crisis. She shouted, "Ming, slow down! What if a train comes?" Ming looked back at Yu Lily and chuckled. He seemed to be in a good mood. The roar of the train came from the tracks that had been crossed behind them. The deafening sound completely blocked out the bustling scene behind them. Ming pulled her and shouted excitedly, "At most, we will die together. Yu Lily, marry me." Yu Lily was shocked. She followed him at a crazy pace and ran all the way. The wind was blowing. It was a little cold. But there was an unknown heat in Yu Lily's heart. It was quickly spreading and burning her whole body. Ta! The long whistle of the train came from the front. Not far away, a train was moving forward at high speed. Yu Lily was shocked. She quickly pulled Ming and screamed, "Don't go over there! It's dangerous!" Ming's footsteps quickly came to a halt. He stopped just one step away from the train tracks. At the same time, Ming stopped and turned his head. He looked into Yu Lily's peach blossom eyes, and his eyes were shining. Such a scorching gaze seemed to be filled with deep love, and it made Yu Lily's heart tremble. Boom, 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 as the train passed by, it caused the surroundings to tremble. It was as if the whole person was shaken to the point that they were about to fly. Ming hugged her with both hands and whispered in her ear, "Marry me. We'll be together in the future." Your mother. Act first and report later? What can she do? Even if she doesn't agree with us being together, I won't divorce you. Legally, she has no right to interfere with our relationship. Boom, 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 the sound of the train continued, with a crazy vibration, just like Yu Lily's mood at the moment. Yu Lily looked at him as if she was looking at a lunatic and asked, "Are you crazy?" "Don't you know if I'm crazy or not?" Ming chuckled. He looked up and saw the Bentley behind Yu Lily. Chapter 11:06. Eloping. Inexplicably, Yu Lily felt a little excited in the face of Ming's crazy attitude. The train behind Ming walked away, and the loud roar gradually faded away. Behind him, the sun shone on him, making him look like a god. His eyes were bright and affectionate. Yu Lily subconsciously raised her lips and nodded her head. In a flash, Ming chuckled, took her hand, and ran forward. When the people in the Bentley saw them run again, they were even more furious. Yu Lily subconsciously looked back at the Bentley behind her and found that the car had already taken a detour. Seeing Ming's mother being defeated, Yu Lily was secretly happy. However, when she looked back, she didn't find that the people in front of her had stopped. When she looked back, she found that they had reached another road. Just on the left side, a car drove over. Yu Lily screamed and subconsciously stepped back, but before she could move, she was pulled by a strong arm and held in his arms. Yu Lily's heart was beating fast. Obviously, She was very scared. Looking at the handsome face in front of her, she quietly breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It was too dangerous just now. What if I had been hit?" Oh Ming stood on the side of the road with her in his arms and whispered, "It's okay. I will protect you." What if I had been hit? Even if I didn't die, at least my hands and feet would have been broken. That would have been ugly. Lily was a little angry and patted him. Just now, she didn't realize that she was on the side of the road. If Oh Ming hadn't pulled her in time, she would have been hit by the car and lying on the side of the road. When he heard Lily's words, Oh Ming's lips curled up in a smile. In a low voice he said, "What are you afraid of? You won't look bad no matter what. If you break your hand, I'll feed you and help you bathe. If you break your leg, I'll carry you on my back and take care of you for the rest of your life." Hearing Oh Ming's words, Lily only felt excited, but she didn't know whether he was joking or serious. But soon she pouted and said, "I won't give you this chance." Oh Ming pinched her face and said, "The light is green." Lily turned her head and found that many people were looking at her. She was a little embarrassed and immediately pushed Oh Ming away and walked across the road. Looking at her back, Oh Ming felt a sense of satisfaction in his heart. He stepped forward and took her hand. Following her, he said, "What about me? If my hands and feet were broken, what would you do?" "That day won't come." Lily didn't look back. She held his hand and walked forward. What if there is? There were many people coming and going. It was the first day of the new year, and it was very lively everywhere. Lily's grip on Oh Ming's hand tightened, and the distance between them grew closer and closer. Oh Ming walked to her side and put his arm around her shoulder. "If I did, what would you do?" Lily thought for a moment and said with a smile, "I'm with you because you are handsome. If you break your hands and feet, you won't be handsome anymore. At that time, I will leave you and not be with you." "How dare you?" Oh Ming knew that she was joking, but he still felt a little unhappy. He pinched her waist in the crowd and said, "If you dare to sneak away, I will definitely kill you." Chapter 1107. Lily was very familiar with the nearby road conditions. Up ahead was a famous local attraction in Kingstown. Couples called it Yu Lao Lake. There were many sculptures by the Yu Lao Lake, including the Earth God, Goddess of Mercy, and various Buddha statues. These sculptures stood around the Yu Lao Lake as if they were guarding something within it. Many couples would choose to come here to pray, throw coins into the water, and release lotus lanterns at night. When Oh Ming said elope, did he mean to come here to commit to his life? Thinking of this, Lily's heart became sweeter and sweeter, and her footsteps became slower and slower. After running for less than a minute, Lily turned around and saw that Oh Ming was blocked by the crowd, unable to catch up. She smiled proudly. He waved at Zhang Xian, and many people turned to look at him. When Oh Ming saw her like this, a look of helplessness appeared in his bright peach blossom eyes. At the same time there was also a strong sense of affection. It was as if he was looking at his most beloved person. It was so sweet that one couldn't help but be immersed in it. Oh Ming was relatively tall, and he was very conspicuous in the crowd. When she saw Oh Ming's gaze, the softness in the deepest part of her heart was touched. After confirming that he had seen her, the wave became smaller and smaller. In the end, Lily raised her hand and stood in place, waiting for Oh Ming to come. Oh Ming looked at her as if he was looking at a naughty child. He slowly pushed through the crowd and walked over. But, suddenly, his arm tightened. The other party had used a lot of strength, and Oh Ming was shocked. He turned his head and saw that it was Chao Ziqing's bodyguard, Guan Yun. Bodyguard Guan was very tall, and he was dressed in black. He was holding Oh Ming's hand tightly. "Young master, Madam is waiting for you in the car. Hurry back," Bodyguard Guan said. His voice was a little stiff, and he couldn't hear any emotion. Oh Ming struggled for a moment and said, "I'm not going back. Tell my mother that I'll be back later." "Young master, Madam's illness has acted up." Bodyguard Guan's voice finally had some fluctuations, and he sounded a little nervous. When Oh Ming heard that, his heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and asked, "Didn't you bring medicine?" "I did," Bodyguard Guan said. But before Oh Ming could heave a sigh of relief, he heard Bodyguard Guan speak again. He said, But Madam refuses to take the medicine now. She said that if you don't go back, she won't take the medicine and will die in front of you. As he spoke, his grip on O Ming's hand tightened. When O Ming heard that, he was so angry that he laughed. He roared, "Mother Kerr, is she crazy? She's using this method to force me to go back?" This was not the first time. The last time she threatened him to break up with you, Lily, she had used the same method. It was despicable. However, he couldn't help but be moved by such a method. No matter how despicable Qiao Ziqing was, she was still his mother who had given birth to him and raised him for decades. When bodyguard Guan heard that, he could hear the nervousness in O Ming's voice. He continued, "Madam asked me to ask you this. She is your mother. For a woman, you're willing to sacrifice your mother's life. Is it really comfortable for you to be together? If she's dead, then she was killed by you and that woman." F***ck. O Ming cursed. He subconsciously looked at Yu Lily, who was in front of him. Yu Lily seemed to have sensed that something was wrong with him. She was trying her best to walk in his direction. O Ming's heart softened, and he said, "I'll let her know." Chapter 1108. O Ming was caught off guard and stumbled. When he looked up in Yu Lily's direction, he realized that she had been covered by the crowd. He couldn't see her anymore. Bodyguard Guan forcefully pulled him in the opposite direction. O Ming looked away from Yu Lily and yelled, "I'll walk on my own. Where's my mom?" "In front. Hurry up." Bodyguard Guan had always been an honest man. From the looks of it, he couldn't be lying. F***ck. O Ming cursed under his breath. He turned around and ran in the direction bodyguard Guan had pointed out. After being squeezed by the crowd, Yu Lily couldn't see where O Ming was anymore. She turned left and right, but she couldn't see him. She shouted, "Oh!" However, there were too many people and too much noise. Yu Lily's voice didn't travel far in the crowd before it was drowned out by the noise. Yu Lily turned back to where O Ming had been. No matter how hard she looked, she couldn't find any trace of O Ming. With her heart empty, Yu Lily stood where she was and looked left and right. However, all he could see was a sea of black heads. And where was that person? O Ming was led by bodyguard Guan and ran for a long time. Finally, after crossing two main roads and exiting the scenic area, they stopped. There were very few people there, and the highway was not far away. A familiar black Bentley was parked on the side of the road facing him. The chauffeur was in the driver's seat, but Qiao Ziqing was nowhere to be seen. O Ming panted and turned to look at bodyguard Guan. "Where's my mom?" "She's in the back seat. Lying down." Bodyguard Guan pulled him toward the car. O Ming felt that something was wrong, but he didn't think too much about it. He walked toward the car in front of him. He went up to open the back seat door. When he did, he saw Qiao Ziqing sitting inside. She looked noble and graceful. She turned her head and looked at him calmly. She didn't look like she was having a seizure. When O Ming saw that, he knew he had fallen into a trap. Annoyed, he was about to walk back when bodyguard Guan held him down and shoved him into the car. After the bodyguard closed the door, the driver immediately locked it. O Ming was flustered and exasperated. He slammed the car door and roared, "You lied to me." Facing her son's anger, Qiao Ziqing was indifferent. She said calmly, "Go home. It's the new year. What's the point of hanging out with a mistress?" "Shut up." O Ming was even more furious. He roared, "She is not a mistress. She is my girlfriend." Qiao Ziqing looked at O Ming and felt that he was hopelessly crazy. His eyes and expression were as if he was looking at a lunatic. "O Ming, you're crazy. You've been infatuated with that woman. You're crazy." "Mom, I know exactly what I'm doing. If you want me to go back with you, sure, but let me go first. I'll say goodbye to her and I'll go back with you immediately." "Impossible." Qiao Ziqing denied without hesitation. "Do you really think I'm stupid? Will you come back after you leave?" It was impossible to use the same move twice. Qiao Ziqing knew exactly what was going on. With a cold expression she said to the driver, "Drive faster." The driver obeyed and sped up. O Ming closed his eyes. She will be waiting for me there. If she can't find me, what should I do? Death. Chapter 1109. Look for you? Do you really think that woman cares about you that much? When she can't find you, she'll naturally go back. Oh Ming's eyes darkened, and he shook his head. No, she'll definitely think that we're lost and wait for me to find her. You Lily wouldn't leave. Even if she didn't see him return, she would still wait for him. Look for him. Seeing Oh Ming like this, Qiao Ziqing's heart ached. After all, as a mother, no one wanted to see their son unhappy. But how could a woman like you Lily be worthy of her son? Now, Oh Ming's status was extraordinary, and he had a certain say in all of Kingstown. But what if? Oh Ming, you have everything now. If one day you fall from your current position, that woman will definitely not be by your side. That kind of woman is vain and fawns over the rich and powerful. If one day you are in trouble, not only will she not be by your side, she might even hit you when you are down. I have seen many women like that. You are bewitched now, but in the future, you will understand your mother's intentions. In this world, only your mother is truly good to you. Do you know that? Oh Ming looked at Qiao Ziqing and said, Oh Ming, you have everything you want now, but if one day you fall from your current position, that woman will definitely not be by your side. Oh Ming looked at Qiao Ziqing and said seriously, Mom, this woman is not what you think she is. You Lily is an orphan and has no parents, but after all these years, I know her too well. She's not the kind of person you think she is. She's better than Shen Manting, 100 times, 1,000 times better. Seeing Oh Ming so serious, Qiao Ziqing was even more furious. She shouted, Why can't you understand? What kind of drug did that woman use on you to make you so loyal to her? Oh Ming, don't make me angry, okay? I don't have much time left to live. Do you really want me to die? Her words were so serious that Oh Ming fell silent and didn't make a sound. Gently taking Qiao Ziqing's hand away, Oh Ming closed his eyes, straightened his body, and sat in his seat. Seeing this, Qiao Ziqing quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Bodyguard Guan was always paying attention to the movements behind him. If Oh Ming made any strange movements, he would immediately be able to stop him. However, after more than 10 minutes had passed and the car was on the highway, Oh Ming didn't move again. Both Qiao Ziqing and bodyguard Guan relaxed a little and calmed down a little. However, Oh Ming suddenly opened his eyes, stood up, and threw himself at the driver's seat. Old Chen had been with Qiao Ziqing for more than 10 years, but this was the first time he had encountered such a situation. He was shocked and shouted, Young master, what are you doing? The car was on the highway. Old Chen was frightened, but he was an experienced driver after all. He quickly drove the car to the side of the railing and stepped on the emergency brake. Luckily, there weren't many cars on the highway. The car behind the Bentley immediately braked, but it still kissed the rear of the Bentley. Bang! The car shook and Qiao Ziqing felt dizzy from the impact. However, at the same time, a cold wind blew from the left. Obviously, the car door had been opened. Lil Oh, come back! Qiao Ziqing yelled when she opened her eyes with difficulty. However, what responded to her was a loud breaking sound and a dull thud. Qiao Ziqing seemed to see a figure suddenly collapse. At the same time, Old Chen's driver cried out, Young master! Chapter 1110. Yu Lily searched for a long time, but she didn't see Oh Ming. After going around in circles, she returned to the original place. It was a sunny day, and the sun was shining brightly. There were fewer and fewer people outside. Yu Lily took off her coat and stood there so that Oh Ming could find her. After thinking about it, she picked up her phone to try her luck. She dialed Oh Ming's number, but his phone was turned off. Yu Lily stood there for more than an hour. But she didn't see Oh Ming. Could it be that he was secretly hiding? That shouldn't be the case. She looked at the time. It was already past 3 in the afternoon. Usually, at home, people should be eating together at this time, right? Or they had already finished eating, gathered together to play cards, chat, or go for a drive around. How nice! But where is Oh Ming? Could it be that he had already sneaked back home? That shouldn't be the case. He wouldn't suddenly disappear. Especially on the first day of the Lunar New Year. Such a special day. Did he hide to give me a surprise? Thinking of that, Yu Lily's tense mood quietly relaxed. The security guard of the scenic spot watched Yu Lily stand there for a long time. Finally, he couldn't help but come forward and ask, "Miss, are you waiting for someone?" Yu Lily smiled and nodded her head. "Yes, I'm waiting for my boyfriend." "You're late for so long? I saw you standing here alone for almost 2 hours. Why aren't you here yet?" "No, he just came with me. There were so many people just now, so he must have run away. I'm waiting for him to come back and find me." When the security guard heard that, he clicked his tongue and said, "What a nice girl. Give him a call. How can you let a girl wait outside for him to feel the cold wind during the Lunar New Year?" "It's okay, big brother. You can go back. I think he'll find me in a while." Yu Lily smiled gratefully. "Sure. If your feet are tired from standing, you can come to our security booth and sit for a while. You look about the same age as my daughter. You're quite pitiful." Yu Lily chuckled and said, "It's okay. Go ahead." "All right." The security guard waved his hand and walked back. Yu Lily stood in the same place for nearly an hour, but she still didn't see him. Could it be that he thought that after coming here to look for her and failing to find her, he went back to wait at her doorstep? The more she thought about it, the more likely it seemed. After putting on his coat, he walked to the side of the security booth and said to the security guard, "Big brother, if a man about this tall, wearing a black trench coat and a dark suit inside comes looking for me, can you help me tell him that I went home to look for him?" "All right." The security guard nodded. "If I see him later, I'll send him home. Do you have his photo?" She quickly took out her cell phone and found Oh Ming's photo. She said, "This." When the security guard saw Oh Ming's face, his eyes lit up, and he said, "This young man is quite handsome. He looks like a star." When she heard someone praise her man, Yu Lily chuckled and said, "I'll have to trouble you then. I'll head back first." All right. This place was a little far from where she lived. If Oh Ming was really waiting at her doorstep, it would be bad. Yu Lily quickly went out and hailed a taxi. When she got out of the elevator, she was disappointed. Chapter 11:11. No. Oh Ming was not here. But where could he have gone? Opening the door, Yu Lily collapsed on the sofa, exhausted. No one expected such a thing to happen on the first day of the new year. Oh Ming was knocked down by a speeding Toyota. His head was bleeding profusely, and even his arm was fractured. The situation was not optimistic. By the time the ambulance arrived, more than 10 minutes had passed. Oh Ming's consciousness was a little fuzzy. When he was carried on the stretcher, he heard Qiao Ziqing crying, apologizing, and repentance. However, in his mind, he remembered the joke he had said to Yu Lily not long ago. "If I broke my arms and legs, what would you do?" Yu Lily was really tired that day. She collapsed on the sofa and fell asleep without knowing it. When she woke up, it was already dark outside. Looking at the time, it was already past 5 in the evening. At this time, Yu Lily's body was a little stiff. She quickly got up and opened the visitor log to check. Could it be that, after Oh Ming rang the doorbell and found no one answered, he left? However, after checking all the records for the day, Yu Lily found nothing. Oh Ming did not come. Yu Lily was very disappointed. She turned to the sofa and picked up her phone, only to find that it was turned off. Returning to the room, she charged the phone and turned it on. She put it aside and went to the bathroom. When she came out, she found that the phone screen was still on. Picking it up, she saw a lot of missed calls and messages. Seeing these things, Yu Lily was happy. It must be Oh Ming. Damn it, why did he only think of calling and texting me now? She had waited at the entrance of Yuelao Lake for 3 hours. Don't expect me to forgive you so easily. Yu Lily unlocked the phone, only to find that the missed calls and messages were all from Xueqi. 7 missed calls and 2 text messages. Feeling disappointed, Yu Lily was not in a hurry to call back. Instead, she opened the messages. However, as soon as she saw the words, her head seemed to be hit by something. Caught off guard, her head buzzed and went blank. "Qianqian, I heard that Oh Ming had a car accident. Are you okay?" "Qianqian, you are not in the hospital. Where did you go?" "Oh Ming is in the operating room. Come quickly. Rehabilitation Hospital." Seeing the message, Yu Lily's hands suddenly trembled, and there was only one thought left in her mind. Oh Ming had a car accident, Oh Ming had a car accident. But why would there be a car accident? However, if he didn't get into a car accident, how could he disappear without a sound? Lily didn't even think to put on her coat. Holding the phone, she rushed out of the door and pressed the elevator button desperately. When she looked down, she found that her hands were slightly trembling. He dialed Xueqi's number. The ringtone sounded as long as a century. Unknowingly, Lily felt her eyes burning and her heart racing uncontrollably. Ding! When the elevator arrived, Lily strode in. At the same time, Xueqi's phone was connected. Chapter 11-12. Xueqi could hear the panic in Lily's voice and said, "Lily, don't be afraid. Where are you now? How is he? Where is he?" "He's in the hospital. He just came out of the emergency room. His hand is broken and—" Xueqi opened her mouth, but she couldn't bear to say it. She said, "You should come and see for yourself. He was looking for you. He was looking for you." When Lily heard that, she burst into tears and cried out, "Is he okay?" "He's fine at the moment, but what?" Lily panicked, but after confirming that he was fine, she let out a sigh of relief and said, "Tell him that I'm coming. I'll be there soon. Wait for me. Come quickly. I'm at the hospital with my husband, but he's been looking for you." "All right." She hung up the phone. The elevator reached the first floor. Lily wasn't wearing a coat. She was only wearing a thin knitted shirt. When the evening wind blew, she shivered. But she had no time to care. By the time she got a taxi to the rehabilitation hospital, more than 20 minutes had passed. After paying the fare, Lily switched off her phone the moment she got out of the car. She ran into the hospital and asked for Oh Ming's ward before heading straight for the 6th floor. The hospital elevator was busy, so Lily ran up the stairs. Lily was panting heavily. Before she could steady herself, she ran in the direction of Oh Ming's ward. Outside the ward, there were quite a number of people. There were medical staff, Oh Ming's family, Li Xiqing, and Luo Zhan. Lily looked at them and panted heavily. She calmed herself down and walked over slowly. Qiao Ziqing's eyes were red and swollen. She looked miserable from crying. She was standing shoulder to shoulder with a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man looked similar to Oh Ming, so he was probably Oh Ming's father. Wen Fenglin was also standing there with Oh Ming's father. Lily's appearance attracted a lot of attention. When Qiao Ziqing saw her, she was angry. She flung Oh Ming's father's hand away and strode over to Lily. Lily looked at Qiao Ziqing and called out, "Auntie, Oh Ming." However, before he could finish his sentence, his face was slapped hard. Qiao Ziqing's slap was very, very heavy. It was so heavy that Lily felt as if she had been slapped directly in the heart, and the pain was burning. His face, which had turned red from the cold, was so numb that it felt like it was going to break under this slap. "How dare you show up? It's all because of you that my son ended up like this. If it weren't for seeing you, Oh Ming wouldn't have grabbed the steering wheel and jumped out of the car." Jump out of the car. Those two words were like a heavy hammer, hitting Lily in the heart. At this moment, the pain was hysterical. In order to see her, Oh Ming jumped out of the car? Lily could clearly feel that her cheeks were slightly swollen. Her face was painful and numb. Qiao Ziqing's words had completely erased the last bit of confidence he had in his heart. She didn't dare to look up at Qiao Ziqing. She lowered her head and asked, "Auntie, how is Oh Ming?" Qiao Ziqing burst into tears. "It's all your fault, you evil spirit. You've really harmed my son." As she spoke, she had already collapsed on the man beside her and burst into tears. Chapter 11-13. What right do you have to see him? Qiao Ziqing roared hysterically. She pushed Lily with both hands and shouted, "Don't you think you haven't hurt him enough? What right do you have to see him? What right do you have to see him?" Qiao Ziqing's words, accompanied by her shove, were extremely hurtful. "Yes, what right do I have? What right do I have to see him? But, at this time, Oh Ming should need me." Although Lily didn't know what Oh Ming looked like at the moment, and she didn't know where he was hurt or where he was uncomfortable, he was looking for her, wasn't he? Yu Lily took a step back and looked up at Qiao Ziqing. She said firmly, "I am his girlfriend." Bah! Qiao Ziqing was furious and roared, "Who do you think you are? You want to be my son's girlfriend? I've seen many women like you. Now, O Ming has just been in trouble, and you're here to put on an act. After confirming that O Ming is seriously injured, you'll leave, right?" Her words were extremely hurtful. In one sentence, she had already determined that Yu Lily was a vain woman. Yu Lily was about to speak when she saw Qiao Ziqing's pleading expression. She said, "I beg you, don't pester my son anymore, okay? Just take it as you've done good deeds. He can't take any more blows now." How much O Ming cared about women could be seen from the moment he jumped out of the car. But, if such a woman knew O Ming's current situation, she would definitely turn around and leave without hesitation. Such a situation, such a blow, was definitely not something O Ming could take. What if O Ming couldn't take it anymore? Absolutely not. You know what? You can go. I'll pretend you were never here. Auntie, you may have some misunderstandings about Lily, but Lily is not the kind of person you think she is. Xueqi, who had been silent all this time, walked to Yu Lily's side and took off her coat as she spoke to Qiao Ziqing. Yu Lily had left the house in a hurry and hadn't even put on a coat. In such weather, she looked thin and weak. In the cold winter, she was shivering slightly. Xueqi covered Yu Lily with her light blue coat and continued, "Lily and I are also good friends. She has been with O Ming for many years." Enough! Qiao Ziqing interrupted Xueqi and shouted, "I will not let her in. Don't even think about it." Even if he didn't let her see, it would still be good for her to know about his situation. Yu Lily moved her lips, but no words came out. Wen Fenglin, who was standing a short distance behind Qiao Ziqing, glanced at Yu Lily. In a hoarse voice he said, "Xiao Qiao, I just arrived. How's Xiao doing?" When Yu Lily heard that, she looked up at Wen Fenglin. On the other hand, Wen Fenglin acted as if he had asked the question in passing. He didn't even look at her. Facing her longtime friend, Qiao Ziqing's attitude was undoubtedly much better. She said, when he woke up, his emotions weren't too stable. The doctor gave him a sedative and he fell asleep. "Come in, let's watch over him together." When Wen Fenglin heard that, he nodded his head. "Go on in. I'm going to smoke a cigarette." Qiao Ziqing and her husband looked at each other and walked into the ward together. Chapter 11:14. Yu Lily's voice was filled with heartfelt gratitude. When Fenglin's small eyes beneath his black-rimmed glasses gazed at her, he said earnestly, "Young people should be more rational. O Ming's condition isn't too good. Xiao Qiao is a little paranoid. It's hard for others to change her mind once she's set her mind on something. I don't know what happened between you two, but Xiao Qiao is a mother. She's only doing this for the good of her son. I hope you can understand. This is just a mother's desire to protect her son. She's not targeting you." Yu Lily was amused to hear that he was clearly trying to clear Qiao Ziqing's name. She looked up at Wen Fenglin's single-lidded eyes and nodded her head. "Thank you." A smile appeared on Wen Fenglin's face. Two deep dimples appeared on both sides of his cheeks. They made him look much gentler. "You're welcome. Go back and rest. They'll be leaving soon. I'll call you over when they're gone." "I'll call you over when they're gone." Looking at the man in front of her, who was about the same age as O Ming's mother, Yu Lily felt a lump in her throat. Her eyes burned. She wanted to laugh, but the muscles on her face refused to listen. If Yu Lily had only felt touched earlier, she was now filled with an indescribable sense of gratitude. Yu Lily's lips turned down uncontrollably. She lowered her head and covered her face. She choked up and said, "Thank you. Thank you." Qiao Ziqing would definitely be guarded against Li Xiqing and Xueqi, but she wouldn't be guarded against Wen Fenglin. Under the circumstances, as Qiao Ziqing's friend, Wen Fenglin was undoubtedly the most qualified person to say such a thing. As long as he was willing to help her, she should be able to see O Ming. But, why would Wen Fenglin help her? The smile on Wen Fenglin's face deepened. He looked at Yu Lily with loving eyes. "You're a good child. Give me your phone." Yu Lily quickly reached for her phone. It was only then that she realized it was out of battery. Looking at the dead phone, she said sheepishly, "It's out of battery. Take this for now. Wen Fenglin took out a small black cell phone from his pocket and handed it to Yu Lily. It looked brand new. I'll contact you later. She looked up at Wen Fenglin in shock. Wen Fenglin put his finger to his lips and said, "Sure. It's time to smoke." As he spoke, he shoved the phone into Yu Lily's hand and turned to enter Oming's ward. Both Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi took in Wen Fenglin's words and actions. Su Qianxi looked at Yu Lily and said softly, "Let's find a place to hide first. We'll come back when this uncle contacts us." Yu Lily pulled herself together and nodded. He put his coat on Su Qianxi, followed the two women, and found a lounge to sit down. About 10 minutes later, their phones kept ringing. They were all from their parents and children, asking them to come home. Today was the first day of the Lunar New Year. The Li family must be happy and harmonious. But they were accompanying her in the hospital. Chapter 11:15. Su Qianxi felt a little awkward and glanced at Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing didn't say anything, so Yu Lily continued, "It's the new year. Your family must have a lot of things to do. Even if you don't need to worry about a lot of things, the 3 children still need you to take them out to play. How can their parents not be around?" Su Qianxi was already wavering, and after hearing Yu Lily's words, she became even more uncertain. She glanced at Li Xiqing, then turned back to Yu Lily and said, "Then, we'll go first. You didn't even put on your jacket, so you don't have any cash on you, right?" As she spoke, she took out her wallet from her bag and pulled out a few notes. Yu Lily quickly tried to push it back, but Su Qianxi immediately said, "Take it to protect yourself first. You can return it to me tomorrow, or you can send it to me on WeChat after your phone is charged. It's okay. Remember to eat and drink." Hearing Su Qianxi's instructions, Yu Lily nodded. She looked down and saw the light blue coat she was wearing. She reached out to take it off and return it to Su Qianxi, but Su Qianxi stopped her and said, "You keep the coat. I'm not cold." As she spoke, she stood up and took Li Xiqing's hand. "We'll go first. Call us if anything happens." Li Xiqing nodded. "Okay." Yu Lily's heart warmed as she looked at Su Qianxi gratefully. Su Qianxi finally relaxed and pulled Li Xiqing out. As soon as they were out, Li Xiqing held Su Qianxi's hand in his and asked, "Are you cold?" "Nope." Su Qianxi was wrapped in Li Xiqing's coat. She looked at Li Xiqing, who was only wearing a thin sweater, and chuckled. "Are you cold?" "Of course." Li Xiqing opened his arms to her. "Come warm me." Su Qianxi chuckled and pulled the sides of the coat to hug him. She looked up and asked, "Are you warm?" "Yeah, I'm warm." Li Xiqing tapped her nose. "Let's go home for the new year. If anything happens to Ming, will his mother inform you?" "She will." Yu Lily was sitting in the lounge. There were young mothers with their children, or elderly people with their spouses coming and going. He sat there until 9 o'clock in the evening. Yu Lily's whole body was sore from sitting. She stood up and stretched, and the cell phone in her hand rang. It was Wen Fenglin's phone. Without a doubt, the call had to be from him. Yu Lily quickly answered the call and shouted, "Mr. Wen, how is it?" Wen Fenglin's unique voice came from the other side. It sounded a little hoarse, but it wasn't unpleasant. He said, "Come over. Ming's condition isn't too stable. He's looking for you." Hearing that, Yu Lily almost burst into tears. The first thing she did was grab her phone and rush out of the door, running in the direction of Ming's ward. However, before he could get close to the ward, he heard Ming shouting. His voice sounded like he was on the verge of collapse. At the same time, there was a deep sense of despair, as if he had experienced unimaginable pain. He roared hysterically, "Scram! Get lost!" Chapter 11:16. His voice was filled with remorse, guilt, and pain. The sobs and sadness that he tried his best to hide in his voice fell into the ears of others, making them feel even worse. Despair. Deep and intense despair. When Yu Lily heard Ming's voice, she stopped at the door. The door was half open. From her angle, she could see Ming's bed. On the bed, Ming sat with his legs bent. His face was buried between his thighs. His head was wrapped in gauze. From Yu Lily's angle, she could only see his ears. As for his left hand, it was wrapped in a plaster cast. Oh Ming's parents stood by the bed. Xiao Ziqing was lying on her husband's shoulder. Her shoulders shook violently, but she didn't make a sound. If you find her, help me tell her that I'll be spending the new year at home. After the new year, I'll be going on a business trip. When I'm back, I'll look for her. His voice was no longer as hysterical as before. Instead, it was filled with pleading and a sense of sorrow and despair. As soon as he said that, Oh Ming raised his head. His pale face was also wrapped in gauze. It didn't look too good. But what moved Yu Lily the most was his eyes. They were the eyes that had completely conquered her and made her fall in love with him. His bright, almond-shaped eyes that were as beautiful as the night sky were revealed when he raised his head. However, such a pair of eyes had no focus, empty and lifeless. It was as if they were the eyes of a wax figure. At the same time when she saw his eyes, the soft place in her heart, which was already on the verge of collapse, broke with a bang and became a pile of debris, stinging her eyes. Yu Lily's tears flowed uncontrollably. She covered her mouth to prevent herself from making a sound. When Feng Lin looked toward the door. When he saw Yu Lily, he shook his head slightly at her. Yu Lily understood what he meant. He was telling her not to go over. Mom, help me tell her, Oh Ming said. Don't let her know about my current situation. Don't let her know that something happened to me. You absolutely can't tell her. His voice was choked with sobs, and his empty eyes were filled with tears. In the midst of such despair, there was a lonely, proud, and fragile soul. Was he afraid of letting her know because his pride couldn't take it? Did he think it was embarrassing, so he didn't want her to know and wanted to maintain his last bit of dignity? How could such a proud and flamboyant Oh Ming not forget to maintain his image in such a situation? That was so stupid. Xiao Ziqing calmed herself down and said in a choked voice, I won't tell her. I'll send someone to look for her immediately and tell her what you've said, okay? Have a good rest and sleep for a while. Maybe you'll recover in a while. It won't take long. My son is blessed by the heavens. Everything will pass. Oh Ming didn't say anything. Xiao Ziqing helped him onto the bed. After a long time he said, Mom, lend me your phone. I'll call her. If you tell her, she won't believe you. I'll tell her. She turned to look at. She and she to and t and. Chapter 11:17. Yu Lily's voice was slightly breathless and nasal. She tried to calm her breathing and listened to the other side of the phone. Yu Lily. It was Oh Ming's voice. When Yu Lily heard that name, she felt a lump in her throat and said, Oh Ming, where are you? The other side was silent for a moment before saying, I'm at home. Isn't it the new year? I forgot to tell you when I left. Are you home yet? Yes. Have you eaten? Yes. Yu Lily wanted to cry, but she bit her lower lip to stop herself from crying. She sniffled. What did you eat? I ate Western food steak. While speaking, his voice had a strong nasal tone. Oh Ming calmed down and asked, Did you catch a cold? Yes, I got some air today and took some medicine. I think I'll be fine tomorrow. Take care of yourself. I might not look for you in the near future. I just remembered that I have something important to do at the company. After the new year, I have to go back for a business trip. Yu Lily had already prepared an excuse. She had already predicted what he would say next. But every word that came out of his mouth seemed to be stabbing into her heart. Every word was so heavy that it hurt dully. When will you be back? I don't know. I'll contact you when I'm back. Okay. Whose phone is this? My mom's. Don't call this number if there's nothing important. Be careful or my mom will scold you. Okay. I'm hanging up. Okay. Sleep early. Okay. Good night. Okay, Yu Lily replied. Her heart felt like it was being pried open by someone with a shovel. It hurt so much that it felt like it was about to be torn apart. It hurt so much. After hanging up, Yu Lily covered her mouth and slowly squatted down. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she bit her palms, not daring to make a sound. In the morning, they had discussed what would happen if something happened to each other. She stood in front of the moon lake and thought for a long time. If something really happened to him, she would not leave him. She was not as fickle and fragile as his mother had imagined. But she had never thought about what would happen to her if he couldn't see. Right now, she couldn't even enter his ward. What could she do? When Ming heard Yu Lily's muffled voice, he knew that she was unhappy. But he didn't dare to ask. It was his fault. He disappeared without a word. It was normal for her to be unhappy. He put the phone down and pressed it to the middle, but he accidentally pressed the speaker. From the other side of the phone came the busy tone of the phone being hung up, and it went straight into his ears. Ming's heart was slightly disappointed. In his mind, he subconsciously recalled the joke he had made with her in the morning. What about me? If I lose my limbs, what will you do? I'm with you because you're handsome. If you lose your limbs, you won't be handsome anymore. When that happens, I'll definitely leave you and not be with you anymore. Ming put down the phone and lay on the bed. He closed his eyes and felt a faint pain in his heart. Dad, take Mom back, he said. It was hard to connect such a quiet Ming with the desperate and crazy man just now. Chapter 11:18. Qiao Ziqing's emotions were indeed unstable, and Ming's father was a little worried. After some consideration, he nodded his head and said, I'll have to trouble you then. I'll bring her back first. I'll come back later. There's no need for that. Just keep her company. I'll keep Xiao company. Wen Fenglin stepped forward and patted Ming's father on the shoulder. Have you forgotten? I've been through it all. Ming's father nodded his head. Okay. Qiao Ziqing and her husband walked out together. The sound of their footsteps gradually faded away. Yu Lily was hiding in the corner of the corridor. When she saw them leave, she walked out and headed for Ming's ward. In the ward, Ming listened to their footsteps leave before asking softly, Uncle Wen, are you very close to my parents? When Wen Fenglin heard that, he laughed and replied, I grew up with your mother. When your mother was wooing your father, it was my idea. That's right. Ming had never heard of this. So, it was Qiao Ziqing who pursued his father? It wasn't easy for young people of that era to be so open-minded. However, Ming wasn't in the mood to probe further. He closed his eyes and lay on the bed. When Fenglin caught a glimpse of a shadow approaching the door. When he saw it was Yu Lily, he smiled and waved at her. Yu Lily closed the door of the ward and walked in with light footsteps. When Fenglin walked over to the water dispenser and bent over to pour a cup of water, he asked, Why didn't you tell your girlfriend? Don't you like her very much? Don't you want her to visit you? Ming's eyes were closed. When he heard Wen Fenglin's words, he was moved. He didn't want her? How could that be possible? He missed her. He really, really missed her. But he couldn't. When Wen Fenglin saw that he didn't respond, he asked again, Doesn't liking someone mean that you want to be with them at all times? He handed the scalding hot water to Yu Lily, but his eyes were still on Ming. Ming's eyes were still closed. His world was a sea of darkness. He had never imagined that a blind man's world could be so dark. It was pure darkness, without any impurities. In front of him, there was only that picturesque smile. I'm with you because you're handsome. If you lose your limbs, you won't be handsome anymore. When that happens, I'll definitely leave you and not be with you anymore. Ming was silent for a moment before replying, You don't understand. When Fenglin glanced at Yu Lily when he heard that. Yu Lily drank more than half of the water in her hand. Looking at Ming in front of her, her eyes and face were red. If she sees me like this and doesn't want me anymore, what should I do? His voice was low, and there was a hint of sorrow in his voice. It was extremely subtle and hard to detect. His voice was so low and hoarse that it could break one's heart. Hearing this, the big bell in Yu Lily's heart was hit hard by such words. Then, accompanied by a huge shock that was enough to destroy everything, it rang loudly. Yu Lily couldn't hold it in any longer. The glass in her hand fell to the ground. She took a step forward and ran toward him. She cried out, How could I not want you? When he heard Yu Lily's voice, Ming froze on the spot. It was still pitch black in front of him, but the voice in his heart was right in front of him. It's her. Chapter 11:19. When he realized this, Oh Ming's heart skipped a beat. The despair and sorrow that had filled his heart was instantly washed away by this joy. At the same time, he felt regret, loss and fear. She's here. She's here. However, he couldn't see it. Did she know? He couldn't see. Oh Ming wanted to raise his hand to touch her, but before he could do much, he felt waves of pain. It was so painful that his muscles spasmed, and he couldn't move at all. His hand was broken. How pathetic. Lily could clearly feel the stiffness in his body, but she pretended not to notice. She sat on his bed and gently wrapped her arms around his neck, avoiding his wound. Oh Ming, on the other hand, was stiff on the bed. He could smell her scent clearly. He greedily buried his face in her hair and hugged her with his other uninjured arm. His voice trembled as he called out, Lily. It's me. It's me. I'm here. Lily's voice was choked up. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Do you know how long I've been looking for you? Do you know how long I've been waiting for you? It wasn't easy for you to call me, but you lied to me like this. Oh Ming had already expected that, based on Lily's personality, she would definitely look for him. His heart was filled with guilt. Oh Ming was silent for a moment. He greedily inhaled her scent, and his eyes couldn't help but feel hot. He lowered his voice and asked, When did you come? He had thought that it would be a long, long time before they could meet again. He had thought that he would have to go abroad for a period of time before he could come back and reunite with her. He hadn't expected that she would come. She had come at the right time. What a coincidence. She came a long time ago, when Fenglin said. He looked at the young couple in front of him with a look of relief in his eyes. In a slightly hoarse voice he said, It's just that your mother refused to let her in to see you. He had expected it. Oh Ming knew his mother all too well. As when Fenglin spoke, he looked at Lily and asked, Miss Yu, Xiao can't see now, and his arm is broken. Don't you despise him? Lily gently released Oh Ming and turned to look at Wen Fenglin. Her eyes were slightly red and swollen with tears. Lily rubbed her eyes and asked, Mr. Wan, if your beloved wife couldn't see any more, and her hand was broken, would you despise her? Wen Jiabao asked. Wen Fenglin had thought that Lily would say something along the lines of, No, of course not, or something along those lines. He hadn't expected that. Wen Fenglin was slightly surprised, but he quickly smiled and said, I don't. Lily was stunned. She suddenly recalled the rumors about Wen Fenglin. The outside world seemed to say that. In that case, the reason Wen Fenglin treated her so well was because. Lily suddenly felt a sense of danger and looked at Wen Fenglin suspiciously. Wen Fenglin could sense Lily's wariness. He laughed heartily and said, What are you thinking about? I may not have a wife, but I did have a lover. But Miss Yu, Lilo isn't your husband now, so are you playing word games with me? Xiao Xiao time. You Xiao you. You. You time and time. You. Chapter 11:20. Oh Ming's words reverberated in the ward. As he spoke, he held Lily's shoulder with his uninjured hand and squeezed it tightly. His voice was as heavy as sandpaper, low and hesitant, as if it took him a lot of courage to ask this question. At that moment, it wasn't just Lily. Even Wen Fenglin could sense Oh Ming's nervousness. Wen Fenglin's eyes darkened when he saw it. Seeing Oh Ming like that, he suddenly felt a little sad. The difference in their love was too great. That was why they were so anxious. Oh Ming didn't feel that secure toward Lily, did he? That was why he had instructed Qiao Ziqing not to tell her. On the one hand, it was because Oh Ming didn't want her to worry. On the other hand, it was because Oh Ming was really worried that she wouldn't want him anymore. When Fenglin looked at the young couple in front of him, they were old enough to be his sons and daughters. His heart was filled with complicated emotions. Wasn't it the same for him and them back then? Because of the difference, it was destined to be a tragedy. When Lily heard Oh Ming's question, she turned her head to look at him. Oh Ming's eyes were empty and lifeless. The deep and bright peach blossom eyes of the past were gone. They might never be seen again. Lily felt a lump in her throat. Her eyes were wet. She gently placed her hand on his and said, Oh Ming, if you hadn't forced me not to die, I would have died many times over. During that time, Yu Lily had been so depressed that she had no desire to live. It was O Ming who had pulled her back from the jaws of death. Wen Fenglin didn't know what had happened. When he heard that, he gave Yu Lily a sidelong glance. Looking at Yu Lily's profile, he felt a sense of déjà vu. Yu Lily patted his shoulder comfortingly and said, "You saved the wife. You can't not marry her. Do you understand?" She had said that he couldn't not marry her, not that he couldn't not marry her. It was a difference of one word. The meaning was the same, but the meaning was vastly different. "No matter what, I'm sticking to you. It doesn't matter whether your mother agrees or not. If you want to marry me, then marry me. If you don't, I'll just die again. It's no big deal." Yu Lily's voice was choked with emotion. When she reached the end of her sentence, she started laughing. Yu Lily smiled, but O Ming felt a lump in his throat. An unknown emotion sprang up. It was so unfamiliar that it made him feel at a loss. He held her in his arms with one hand. He didn't say a word, but hot tears rolled down his cheeks and fell on her neck. Yu Lily's heart ached. She gently patted his body and asked, "Will you marry me?" "Marry." O Ming kissed her cheek gently and said, "It wasn't easy to catch a blind one. I can't let you get away." "Get lost." Yu Lily scolded him with a smile, but her heart was warm. Fortunately, even though he couldn't see, he was still O Ming. Fortunately, although he couldn't see, he didn't give up. That was enough. Yu Lily gently leaned on his shoulder. Her voice was gentle and firm. "In the days to come, I'll be your eyes." "Okay." O Ming gently pushed her away. "Whose clothes are these?" Yu Lily looked down and said, "They belong to Qianqian. I didn't wear a jacket just now. She lent it to me. It doesn't smell as good as yours. Change it." Li Siqing. "Say that again." Chapter 11:21. Yu Lily instinctively sniffed Su Qianxi's clothes. It smelled nice. When she saw the serious expression on O Ming's face, she took it off. When Fenglin looked at them and sighed softly, he said, "Looking at all of you reminds me of my youth. More than 20 years ago, I was a poor artist who was filled with nothing but vengeance and dreams. If I'd had your determination back then, I wouldn't have ended up in this state." When Fenglin laughed, "Little girl, based on the current situation, Xiao Qiao won't accept you. Why don't we use another method?" "Method?" Yu Lily looked at Wen Fenglin in surprise. When O Ming heard that, he turned his head slightly and asked, "What method?" "A way to make Xiao Qiao beg you to be with O Ming," Yu Lily said. Ever since the incident with Xin Luo An and Xin Manting, Yi Yuyu hadn't returned to the Xin family. From then on, Yi Yuyu's name had never been mentioned in the family. No one had ever mentioned Yi Yuyu. In the dining room, old Mrs. Shen sat at the head of the table. Xin Longyue, Mrs. Shen, Xin Luo En, Xin Manting, and Xin Jilia were seated. There was no one else. Typically, the first day of the Lunar New Year should be bustling with excitement and joy. However, on the first day of the Lunar New Year this year, the atmosphere was indescribably strange. Old Mrs. Shen didn't look too good. No one else dared to pick up their chopsticks. Shen Longyue cleared his throat and said, "Mom, it's time to eat." "I don't want to eat," old Mrs. Shen blurted out like a child. "I don't want to eat. I want to see that girl." "Which girl?" Shen Longyue asked. "Shen Yingyue." When these three words came out, everyone at the table became even more silent. Shen Longyue felt helpless and said, "Mom, that child died a long time ago. Have you forgotten?" "Who said she's dead?" "She's not dead." Old Mrs. Shen was a little angry. She stood up and said, "I'm going to Kingstown. I'm going to Kingstown to see her. Her name isn't Shen Yingyue anymore. It's Yu Lily. I'm going to find her and change her name." "Mom." Shen Longyue had a headache. 2 years ago, you also mistook the 13-year-old granddaughter next door as Shen Yingyue. 5 years ago, you also mistook Miss Gao from the next alley as Shen Yingyue. This time, who is Yu Lily? It's the woman who saved Grandma last time. She's the girl who kept pestering Grandma when she refused to return to the capital. Ahem, she's also O Ming's girlfriend. Hearing that, Shen Longyue frowned. He looked at the old lady and said, "Okay, Mom, you eat first. We'll go after the new year, okay?" "No, I have to ask her to come back for the new year. She has been spending the new year alone for so many years. How can she spend it outside this year? We have to get her back." "Grandma, I know where she is. Be a good girl and eat first. I'll ask her to come to the capital to see you later, okay?" Shenjilia walked over and helped the old lady up. "She almost became my girlfriend. I can get her back." "Good job, young man. You're so fast. It would be great if that girl could become our daughter-in-law." Old Mrs. Shen clapped her hands in approval. "Hurry up and call her." Shenjilia was speechless. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.